Okay, so I actually didn't have switched over on YouTube, but I do now. So hopefully everybody can see me. Were you able to hear me before? In any event, sorry about that. There's a lot going on. Oh no, this is catastrophic. Yeah, this is. Is it? Was it that bad? I haven't seen it. I heard about it. I just heard it was bad. Um, what are we gonna do about this? Um, well, what we can do about this is we can set an example, for the guy we're trying to defend, um, because there is a difference between the two sides, and it showed up during Charlie Kirk. I thought it was the most telling thing about Charlie Kirk, and then to have Donald Trump go off and act like one of the people um, who were saying, "Yeah, I'm glad Charlie Kirk died," is just. Um, it, it's not like we don't have enough to fight without having to score points on ourselves here. It's just Dave Big Booty says it's hard to defend a guy who said on record, "F all you MAGA a-holes." Yes, um, yes. And what I'm going to say tomorrow um, is that, yeah, everything about, well, nobody panic. Yeah, the point I'm going to make tomorrow is I think that the general difference between the left and the right is that for the left, politics is everything, and they cannot um, contain it. I'm not schmaltzing up either, Barbara. Not saying you're accusing me of that. It's not like I'm going to cry about this, but um, but um, the guy gave us some really amazing stuff. Uh, I just want to. I know obviously most of them, but Princess Bride, obviously, Few Good Men, right? Let me see what else. So I guess we're going to have to show him how it's done. I don't know how many people are old enough to remember Spinal Tap. Um, just working backwards here. Wolf of Wall Street was a great movie. Uh, Stay with me here. By the way, the Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, um, the and he was rather gracious about Charlie Kirk, as I recall. Uh, Misery was a good film. Okay. In any event, and did he did he direct When Harry Met Sally? Yeah. So look, um, it's possible for me at least. Yes, he hates us. Um, I understand he hates us, but this is the point I'm trying to make, right? Okay, so those are great films. Um, uh, Fame name. We run the stream. We run dual streams. We run it on Twitch and on YouTube. And the reason we do that is because it's been a Stratosphere Lounge tradition from, I think, nearly the first show, um, uh, that we have like walk-in music, and we can't stream that on YouTube because it it basically just pulls it down because we use copyrighted music. So we do dual streams, and Twitch is kind of like the the old school kind of thing. So there we go. But Darth Chuck the Merciless says one can appreciate the art and disagree with the artist's opinions. I really think yeah, we shall not speak of Ustream. My God, thank you, Dave. I'd forgotten about how bad that was. So look, it's I think it's kind of I think it's important for us to set this example and make it clear, and to have the president just go off and make the case that yeah, there is to the leftists that there's no difference between the left and right. Both of you say horrible, awful things, and it's just not true. So it's really disappointing. It's really disappointing. So anyway, yes, he was a complete leftist lunatic. Hang on a second. Roger Amjad here says, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump with his obvious paranoia. Okay, well, he ended up apparently saying, "May Rob and Michelle rest in peace." So it's not quite as easy. It's not quite as awful as I'm glad they're dead, and I'm going to, piss on their graves. But his supporters deserve better than that. So, all right. Well, it is what it is. So I'll deal with that tomorrow. So it's been a real busy weekend for me, colonies wise. I've been really digging in on this, obviously, because I think it's real important. I got some things to show you, and we'll get into the questions. I know we had a problem with those last time, so let's just get off of Rob Reiner for the time being. So let me tell you what I've been doing. There is a lot of stuff in this kind of 3D or AI video world that's just really, really fun. Like, as I mentioned many times, a bumpy ride home. Every frame I was rendering was just like, oh, it's fantastic. Putting it together was great. But the hard work that separates the men from the boys and the slop from the, the ability to say, I can't tell that that's AI, is really, really important. That kind of shoe leather work to just keep increasing the basics, because once you've got the basics locked, everything that you build on top of that is going to be it. So in terms of the AI stuff, to explain to you what I've been working on, and I've got some things to show you. What I've been working on is making sure that the foundational images are as good as they can be for the characters. And I've been working with Lisa, the character of Lisa, on this because it's an interesting character face. It's one of the two major characters in the show, and I've got to have. I'm at the point now where I'm going to start producing scenes with dialogue, reversals, and all of this. And everything that gets generated comes down to that initial reference frame of that face. So that's the absolute minimum. So I had to be doing a lot of work on that face. So let's see if I can show you some examples, because it basically had to redesign Lisa. I had to add more details to her face, a lot more, because it was showing up as very plastic in the renders, and I had to change the geometry of her face a little bit because she actually resembled a real person a little bit too much. So let me show you what I've been working on here. So let me do this. And where's the old one? Hang on. I've got a video too. Hang on a second. Where is she? Yeah. Okay. So these pictures are probably going to be a little bit big, but I have to resize them, but I'll drag them in so I can show you the difference here. Okay. So I'm going to use Lisa as an example for every single character that appears in the colonies. I'm sure that in a year or two or maybe 3 years, we'll have to basically go and update everything because the technology is advancing. But since this show's about entertainment and we're kind of in full colonies mode, I'm going to show you some of the backstage stuff that happens. And probably the easiest way for me to do this would be just to, yeah, let me just do this. Hang on, I'll just resize these guys now so that they'll fit. Just 1 second. Just get in and out of Photoshop real quick. So there we go. Nope. Sorry, hang on. I know I should have been more prepared. I was working up to the last minute here. Let me just do this new 1920 by 1080 frame. Okay, great. Go with that. So yeah, it's a little big. Hang on. It's going to be an interesting demonstration for you guys. If I can just get this done real quick here. So what I'm about to show you here are two different versions of Lisa's face. The first version, which I've been using up to this point, which is wonderful and which I just adore, and then the second one, which is in a lot of ways, not quite as satisfying, sort of, but if you look at it, it's considerably more believable. And the translation, once you get to putting this into other images, it just reads much better. So here we go. So here we go. So I'm curious to get your feedback on this. Now, what I'm about to show you here, yeah, we did talk about Rob Reiner, and we'll come back. I'm doing a right angle on that tomorrow. Okay. All right, so in a way, it's a little strange because in a lot of ways, I like this first image better. But I have to go with the second one because the first image is not translating well into the various image generating softwares. There's not enough detail. There's not enough information. So it all comes out looking really plastic. So I had to do a more realistic version of Lisa, which I think is more realistic looking, and it, it's not like I'm going to put this up to the vote because oh, come on. All right, I'll do it this way because I really have to stick with this. All right, so here we go. Ready? This is the original reference version of Lisa, and everything that I did with that you've seen so far with Lisa was based off of this image, which I really like. Okay, so that's the Lisa version 1, and it's a great look and adorable character, but there's not a lot of details on the skin. So what I'm going to show you is the new Lisa, which is a little shocking. It's a lot more realistic. It's not nearly as a photo studio, but it's got a lot more detail to translate into various images. So this is the new version of Lisa that we're going to be going with here. You can see that the facial geometry is almost identical, slightly different, but you should also be able to see like a really marked increase in photorealism. That the new one is significantly more realistic looking, I think, and it produces much better results. So yes, it's a more neutral expression, and the neutral expression helps us because if you have a smiling expression and you then try to make a serious look out of it, the AI doesn't really know what to do with it. Looks like the second one is older. She does look a little bit older, and that's kind of good too. It just looks, yeah. The first one looks like someone said makeup, one with makeup and one without. Yeah, and I think that's fair. Let me just go back to the first one real quick. But this first one there's not enough visual information for the AI to grab a hold of. So whenever this master goes into a different image generator, the skin comes off as really plastic, just very plastic. And I needed to go with the second version to have a more reliable and believable face. So I did a couple of quick video tests, and I'm going to run these for you. It's the Dave Big Boutte says the 800 series had rubber skin. We spotted them easily. Yeah, those first generation, those Nexus ones were just really not not really up to snuff here. Yeah, she got a little bit of a Bailey thing going on. Pete 7 2017. It's that same archetype, right? That kind of cute tomboy pixie kind of look. So here we go. I'm going to run this little short video for you. This is not acting. This is just I'm giving her just lines to say. So don't judge it by the performance. The lines are just random lines. What we're really just looking at is facial realism and facial believability. Okay, so I'll run both of these for you, and then I'll come back. But this is what the new face is generating, and it's a lot less plastic looking than the ones that we had before. So ready? I'm gonna drop it into YouTube, then I'll drop it into Twitch. There we go, YouTube. Oh damn it! I hate it when it does that. Okay, here comes Twitch.
What? What?
I think that looks really realistic.
I would retrieve for a story. We'd be what? What?
Get over here right now, you big hunk of a man, before I bite you really hard.
The reason we're using the laugh is because it's a good example for facial distortion. A big laugh like that really distorts the face.
What?
And I just think it looks really natural and really good. And you'll see the close-up of the eyes, and Nano Banana Pro has generated texture. This is really important. I'll talk about this in a second.
Storm's moving in. This one is gonna be nasty.
I think that's it. Hang on. Yep, that's it. Okay, so yeah, I think it looks really real. I think it looks great, and yeah, and it's really really believable. I think that looks indistinguishable from reality, honestly. So we're trying to get. She's got the crazy Tucker Carlson laugh. Yeah, bye bye Hollywood. So here's what we did. I spent pretty much the whole weekend working with ChatGPT in Nano Banana to train a model. So if you train a model in Nano Banana, you could take that character, put it into every shot, and it would be consistent. But it looked awful. It was really, really low res and not good. So I wasted 2 full days on that. But Midjourney, which is not known for reproducing faces very well, created those shots of her on the frozen beach, and I thought those looked great. But here's one thing that Nano Banana does that is absolutely essential to making this process work now, like today. I'm going to load these frames into. Hang on, let me just zoom that up for you guys here. So if you look at the, I think probably the upper right shot. Hang on there, Twitch. So I gave it the upper right shot, the one that's MLS, medium long shot. I just uploaded that one shot to Nano Banana, and then I said, generate me an extreme long shot, a medium long shot, a mid close-up, a close-up, an extreme close-up, which it did of her shoulder plate, but I did another one with her eyes. You can see the detail in her eyes, low angle and high angle. And the thing that's critical about this, really critical, is that it preserves the lighting, and it preserves the costume, it preserves the face geometry and everything. So when you find a shot in this grid that you like, you can then extract that shot into a full frame shot, and then you can animate that shot. So I know this sounds hard to believe, but if I were to do this as a, like, if I were to take let's take the close-up in the center row on the right, CU. If I were to take that close-up and then tell it to do a long shot or a mid shot, it would probably change the costume, it would probably change the face and so on. And all of this ability to create shots that are consistent means now you can start actually having scenes with dialogue. You can go to a close-up, you can go to a mid-shot, and it doesn't change the face, it doesn't change the background, it doesn't change the clothes. It's a fundamental breakthrough. And before I got into that, I had to get a face that I thought was going to hold up for the entire first season, because I don't want to do this again. And I think it does a real good job of that. But what's really critically important here, and again, I know I'm splitting like technical details. Yeah, the suit is, I said a science fiction cold weather suit. And anytime you say science fiction, it automatically puts the ring around there. So I could take care of that. So what Nano Banana is doing is, if I give it like a shot with enough information to show the geometry of the face, you can do an extreme close-up on the eyes, and it will put in, you saw it during the animation, it will put in like the micro wrinkles and all the pores. That's generated by the AI on the fly, and that is absolutely game-changing, because if you were just to push the image, the information's not there. It just doesn't have it. There's not enough resolution. So with this, we're about ready to go. And so the workflow is really going to be, I'm getting everything straightened out on Lisa, and then I'm going to do it with not only with Jake and Will and Claire, but every other character that's going to appear in this thing. I'm just trying to get the workflow set up. So we have to generate a really good master shot of the face. We also need to generate a good full-length shot of them, just within the frame, head to toe. Right, this is what their body looks like. This is how big Jake is. This is Lisa's proportions, and the same for Will and Claire and everybody else who follows downstream. And what I have to do is I have to I have to do this, like this body shot of them, full-length body shot, to get their proportions correct. And that body shot really should have them in, I'm just going to have them in basically in black spandex, because I need to be able to show the later iterations what those proportions are. So if I've got an A-frame pose, with their arms at their side of Jake and Lisa in like black bodysuits or whatever, then there's other software where I can, I've got them, Quibo. There's other software where I can take a science fiction outfit, or actually science fiction outfit's not so good. Take like really cold weather clothing, the kind of stuff they use on Everest, right? You just take a photograph of that clothing, and you take the character thing and the photograph of the clothing, put it into this software, and then the characters will be wearing that clothing. Claire's the daughter, yeah. So what ends up happening is I need excellent references of the face, and I've got a really good reference face for Lisa. And I'm working on the one for Jake. I need a full body shot of each one of them, and this will apply to all the characters, to get them their body proportions. How big are they? Then with that, I can get them into probably 3 or 4 outfits. Will probably get us, in the case of like major characters like Jake and Lisa, like the family, I think at least for the pilot episode, 2 or 3 outfits would definitely do it. You need an inside outfit, what they wear when they're around the house. You need an outside outfit, what they wear out there on this cold planet, and maybe a variation just so they're not wearing the same clothes every time. By the way, if you think about it, everybody wears the same clothes all the time. On Gilligan's Island, everybody wears, they've got a good excuse. But on Star Trek, pretty much everybody's in a uniform. Nobody really changes their fashion. I like, take the Expanse, for example. I didn't see a lot of the Expanse twice. I saw the whole episode, the whole series once. But I never saw in detail. But they were more or less constantly wearing the same thing, right? They wear the same jumpsuit, they wear this and that. Real people don't dress that way. But 3 or 4 outfits each. And then when I've got them in their cold weather clothes and their indoor clothes and maybe one other set of clothes, then I can take those images and put them into scenes. Now here's where, as my friend Phil Trick used to say, we would say, I used to say this is where the shinola hits the fan, but Phil would say this is where the cheese gets binding. The images you saw of Lisa on the beach were taken into Midjourney, which is by far the most creative image generator. Everything else does something blandly realistic. But I can only do that for one character at a time. I can only give Midjourney one reference to reproduce. So in order to do this, I have to do a bunch of compositing. So it looks like the workflow will be drag the full-length shot of Jake into the reference thing, and then describe the ice planet. And then using the exact same prompt, you put the reference photo of Lisa in there and describe the ice planet. Now you've got 2 different images with 2 different backgrounds, but hopefully the lighting conditions are more or less the same. And then I have to go into Photoshop and take one of them out of that and put them together so that they're both in the same frame. If they're both in the same frame, then I can not only animate that frame, but if they're both in the same frame, then I can set up using Nano Banana reversal shots and all of this stuff, and then I can do actual scenes that are, consistent. So we're still a long way away from being where we need to be. All of the performances, the major performances, have to be motion capture performances from actors. One of the things that generates an AI slop sense is when the computer does the acting. You type in the dialogue, even if it's good dialogue, it gives you an AI read. It doesn't give you, excuse me, doesn't give you a good performance. There's a halfway step that I haven't tried. I have tried facial motion capture, which we did with the Zeus thing. That works. It's a little blurry. I can sharpen that in post. Quibo says, are you using Kling? I'm using everything, dude. I'm using everything under the sun. The one thing I haven't tried is I've tried text to dialogue, but I haven't tried audio only to dialogue. So if you use audio only, it's like a halfway house to the performance. You get more variation in the tone and the read than you would get with facial motion capture. But to be honest with you, I really need facial motion capture. I need to be able to have actors do this. And the beautiful thing is they can do it on their iPhones. They just read it into the phone. Just read the performance into the phone, send me the file, and it drives the AI. But I realized that all of this stuff that I was about to do, start making these scenes and everything, was going to be based on no scene that I would generate would be better than the initial reference photo, so that in the best of all possible worlds, either oops, come on. That is going to be the best possible image, which is too plasticky, or, oops, sorry. Nope, one more. Come on, Bill, you can do it. Gosh darn it, where is that bloody picture? There. There. So that's everything I do. I see Cindy Williams. I see a little Bailey. I see a lot. It's an archetype, and I really like that archetype. So before I started making these scenes, I realized I had to get these image quality up to. Come on, Bill. Had to get the image quality up to the highest level I could, and that's what we've done. So where'd I go? No, that's not me.
What?
Okay, got it. So there it is, and so we're actually making a lot of progress on getting this to be really, really, really good. Good stuff. So I think that's about it for this. Oh, and I'm going to have to start getting into. We have to do Blender for the spaceships, and one of the things that I haven't tried yet, because Nano Banana now apparently allows you to import a 3D file, which means all the 3D information is there. So one of the things I'm going to test tomorrow, I may even test it tonight, is to take a spaceship model, strip off the texture, and strip off all the little details, because the AI will put those on and see if it works. But I suspect we're going to have to be using Blender to render the spaceship stuff and so on. Air Techie says, will Natasha get jealous that you're spending so much time with this Rachel woman? She has asked a few questions about this, and I don't blame her. The reason that it just seems so obsessive with this face is that I need a face to be consistent. I need something that I can compare things to. Now that we've got that Lisa's face locked, this is, I'll show you the two. Here's Jake. Shrink him down a little bit. So I've been doing a lot of work on him now, and it won't be all Lisa, 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 Lisa all the time. This is a much more subtle version of Jake. He's got his wrinkles are not nearly so pronounced. They were over represented in the renderings of him. I probably need to add a little more detail to his face, but we've got the tools to do this. So, in any event, it's all about the basics. This is a thing I realized somewhere, last week, was that I was about to start producing these scenes, and I realized the scenes are only going to be as good. They'll never get better than those reference images that I just showed you. So I got to get those absolutely cranked. Marisha says, how much would it cost to get photographed turnarounds of real actors to seat each character? Actually, when you leave Midjourney alone, since you asked, the original Lisa had a photographic base, and I iterated it until I found something I liked. One of the reasons that the detail quality of the original Lisa's face is so relatively light was because the photograph that I used was not super high quality. But when I took 2 computer iterations based on a photograph of Lisa's face, one of which you saw, and then took them into Nano Banana and said blend the face, what it did was, when it blended the face, it added a lot of detail that wasn't there before, and we just kind of stumbled into a really good solution. So, what it really comes down to is, just to give you like off the top of my head, we got this great reference face that we did in Midjourney. We took them into Nano Banana and took 2 good reference faces, blended them together to get the really super high quality skin detail. So now we've got good reference faces, locked reference faces for Lisa, almost locked for Jake. We'll do the same thing for Will and Claire, and then we'll do the same thing for the other characters. Once we've got the faces, we have to take them into another software, probably something called Imagine You, which really preserves facial identity well, do the full-length shots. Then when we've got high-quality full-length shots, we have to take them into a different piece of software, the name escapes me, where I can drag and drop costumes onto them, and then the costumes will be what we'll use for our shots, and we'll take those costume shots, put them into something like Midjourney or something, composite them in Photoshop, and then use those still images to animate the video. Marisha says, personally, I think you're spending too much time on polish and detail, not enough on actual story and animatics needed for the first stage of crowdfunding. Well, then if I don't spend this time, it's going to look like AI slop, and that's not going to happen. So I know what I'm doing. Got him Coach said, Bill, did you hear that 99% of voice actors will be extinct in 2 years? Let me just address that, and then I'll get to the questions. The thing that makes AI look and sound like AI is that people don't go to a lot of trouble to get their base picture right, and then even if they do, they go to text to video. So, thou shalt not pass, and you tell it to do it in a wizard's voice, and it will it'll get you close, but it won't be as good as Ian McClellan. What this technology needs is Ian McClellan reading into an iPhone mapped onto a picture of a wizard, because the performance, the micro details in the performance are what sell the performance. It's just that simple. It's facial motion capture, it's the actual pauses, and if you can get that on a frame by frame basis, then it's not AI anymore. Then it's just if people can tell that it's AI video, I've failed. So all of the stuff that has to happen on the ground floor. It's got to get right on the ground floor, and this is what I've been working on and realizing and so on. So as far as the crowdfunding of this thing goes, and the initial investors and all the rest of that stuff, between the Monday before Thanksgiving and the beginning of the second week of January, nothing happens. Nobody starts any new projects. Nobody. It's just dead. I can just tell you now from just gently pinging it. It's actually dead. So in January, I got to have new stuff that I can go out to these people with. Now back to the actors thing. I suppose that it will be possible. In fact, that Speak of the Devil thing I did was text to animated video, and I had two different characters, and I was pretty happy with them. However, I had to run 30 versions of a character reading a line, each one of which was slightly different, in order to get a read that didn't sound like it was done by a computer. And so it's very tedious. The way to do it is to have a professional actor come in and just read the lines. And then you just drag that file directly into the animation software, and you get exactly the performance. And we even have software now that'll do the actual motion capture. In a perfect world, all of this stuff comes together where you give it a high resolution photo, it holds onto that model, you put and we'll see this in a year and a half, if not sooner, but we're not there yet. Do I have a demo for an approximate runtime you're aiming for? What I'm trying to do, what I plan to do for what I need to have in place, and this is what I need these initial investors for, the founding fathers for, is to prepare a number of issues that are available, demo videos that are available for the first pilot episode crowdsourcing run, which is $600,000. And I need one finished, polished scene from each of the 5 storylines. And the 5 storylines are the founders, the actual businessmen, and various high-level individuals who are determining to launch this second American Revolution. The founders is one storyline. The pioneers is the second. That's the one I've been working on with Jake and Lisa. That's the one I've been concentrating almost exclusively on. The third one is the explorers, which is what I did with the floating jellyfish thing. And I've had to scrap that and go back to basics because, number one, all of the animation made them look like jellyfish. It didn't know what to do with them. It just saw jellyfish, so it just didn't know. AI is astonishingly precise and detailed, but very, very stupid when it comes to this kind of thing. And you can tell it 50 times, no jellyfish animation, and it won't know what else to do. So the Explorers subplot is about the USS Armstrong exploring this newly mapped system that's going to be basically the home planet going to be the capital of the colonies. So that's 3. The founders, the pioneers, the explorers. The fourth one is the warriors, which will be naval warfare. This will be kind of the John Paul Jones story. And then the final one is the free traders. The free traders are the story of a bunch of guys. It's a crew of 4 or 5 that have a modest-sized ship. There's a bunch of different ship types. I'm getting to Taffy 3. It's just can't lead with Taffy 3. Taffy 3 is way down the road. The free traders thing has a particular kind of ship that I'm calling a G2O or an O2G, ground to orbit, orbit to ground, and it's basically a variation on the drop ship in Aliens, but basically it's a ship that has at least 2, maybe 4, sometimes even 6 main thrusters that are pivotable, like the wings, like the rotors on a tilt rotor, and these things will be able to simply take off vertically and just rotate the engines backwards and then just boom, blast its way up into orbit and come down and land from orbit. So they're orbit to ground, ground to orbit. Because of the nature of the probability stations, I'm trying to work myself out of Stargates. That even a simple ship like an OTG ship can get on one of these probability gates and go from one place to another. So the reason that I have the free traders is because the free traders allow me to show everything in the colonies. They can go anywhere down these probability lines. They don't have to be stuck in one system. The founders are stuck in Earth. the pioneers are stuck on it's Sniffelberg, forgotten. They're stuck on their colony planet. The explorers are stuck exploring a new system, which they had to get there on sublight speed. The military guys can be in a bunch of different places, but the free traders allow us to see the entire universe. They can go anywhere we want to. Niflheim, thank you very much. I appreciate it when you can help me with my own name. Yeah. Niflheim, which means, I think, the cold place in Norse mythology, but they call it Sniffelheim because people got a cold and flu all the time there. All of that stuff gets me all of this. Now, which one dominates? I've seen a number of comments that seems like the pioneers are going to be the primary story, and I feel like that's going to be true. I think that's probably the most accessible story. I do have character concepts for. I'd forgotten how much work I did on this. 2-3 years ago, I wrote a Bible for these characters, and I wrote like 7 pages. And each one of these 5 subplot stories has really, really detailed backstories on all of them. I'll read you one example. Of the kind of detail that I've actually gone to here. Just one. Oh, and unless things change dramatically, what I'm going to probably do is I just love the Mace Mattingly character so much. If I can get this thing off the ground, I think what I'll probably do is take all 4 of them into the naval story, into the warrior story. I've already got a good sense of the dynamics between those 4 characters, and if I were to make Mace Mattingly captain of a ship and make Sparks his executive officer, and you keep the dynamic that's between them already, it's a really interesting dynamic and sets up some kind of cool things, because if you remember from the Mace Mattingly interviews, Sparks and Mace are just constantly ribbing each other. And it would be interesting to see what happened in a situation where the captain, a lot of drama here, some of it's really good and some of it's potentially really bad, which is a great mine for drama. But what would happen if you had a flagship naval vessel that was really advanced, because it's a quality over quantity argument, that's the American way of doing things. You had essentially this singular ship, and you've got this John Paul Jones character in Mace, let's say. But what happens when you have a situation where the experience levels in the ranks of the executive officer are actually very close, where it's almost like a rivalry, and you're constantly having to keep that balance. When the 2 guys are working together, they're phenomenal, but it sets up a lot of cases of, you sure you want to do that? And it's just, I just think it's interesting potential. Anyway, let me just read you this one character here. I'll tell you what. I'll just read you the whole thing on the free traders, okay? It'll take a few moments, but we haven't seen any of these guys. So I'll just read you this. God, it's actually 3 pages. Oh my God, it's 4 pages. Might be a little long to read. I'll just do it to you so you can, I will get through all the questions tonight, okay? So forgive me for this, but this is like just the free traders background story that I've done, and we haven't talked about them at all. So if it's if reading is boring you, now's the time to bail, and no one would blame you, certainly. Where did I put the other? That's so strange. There it is. Okay, sorry. Okay, so here's the Writer's Bible as it exists on the Free Traders. This story arc concerns the crew of a small, privately owned freighter trying to make a living by delivering the scraps that the large shipping firms do not find profitable enough to bother with. While not outlaws, they operate in a realm where there is very little law, if any, meaning they must be smart, tough, and savvy, qualities that usually have to be beaten into people through the miracle of experience. Starting with a very small vessel, they are determined to move into the largest model of the privately owned orbit-to-ground, ground-to-orbit freighters, the Sparta Aerospace Centaurus class, a loud, powerful, and exceedingly ugly brute that is universally known as the Smoking Thunder Pig, which are now starting to flood the private markets as military surplus. The desire for this kind of muscle, this kind of size, is obsessive, and all of their efforts are dedicated towards this goal. So here are the characters. James Bolter Harris, black male, early 40s. Former Navy pilot, Bolter Harris is the captain and pilot of this small, this is not the big one yet, of the small service-capable freighter called the Mary Sue. See what I did there? He's excellent at both of these jobs. His only problem is that he is utterly, completely terrible with money, which, as the head of a small business operating on the thinnest of margins, is a bit of a problem. Now, fortunately for all concerned, he is aware of this problem. Unfortunately for all concerned, he's become convinced that all of his financial problems would disappear if he could just get into the Centaurus-class ship, which he had flown for 22 years in the Navy, and which he practically worships in the way that certain teenage hot rodders were either Ford or Chevy men. There is, in fact, a great deal of the teenager remaining in Bolter, a roaring enthusiasm when things are going well, a tendency towards despair when they are not, a daring and dash and charisma of undeniable proportions, and yet the seeming inability to avoid making the same mistakes over and over and over again. He will only fly in Sparta aircraft, and while he is always on the lookout for a used Smoking Thunder Pig that even he knows he can't afford, everyone else can see that they can't make the small business work, that if they can't make the small business work, he is unlikely to make a larger one work either. Bolter doesn't care much for any kind of spit and polish BS from his all-civilian crew, but he absolutely does expect military-type obedience once the order is given. That said, he's generally relaxed and confident enough to include the crew in discussions of whatever options they may be facing. It is, after all, a small family, and he is trying to keep them together without much money to use as glue. He's calm, tough, and generally agreeable. There is one thing that absolutely cripples him, however, and that is a burning, nearly all-consuming outrage whenever he feels he's been cheated. Given the rough-and-tumble economy at the frontier, this is not an infrequent occurrence. Bolter realizes that in a business world with very little law enforcement and virtually zero legal recourse, your reputation, your personal reputation, as either a pushover or a person not to be trifled with is really all that you have, and he will not hesitate to make clear which category he, his crew, and his business belong to. So that's the story of Bolter. Second character, Ichika Mori, Japanese female, mid-20s. Ichika Mori is the financial brains of the operation, terminally shy and very risk-averse. It is not uncommon to see her in a full pressure suit during the most routine of operations. She's quiet, extremely deferential towards Bolter at all times, and all of this hides a relentless ambition to become fantastically wealthy, having started from absolutely nothing. The daughter of a widowed house servant, she has endured her shame of humiliation as a child, and while she respects and adores her now aged mother, her servile attitude and willingness to take seemingly endless abuse kindled a fire in young Ichika. She's already achieved the first phase of her ambition, which was be able to afford to set her mother up in a small apartment without having to endure the continuing humiliation. Her mother does not realize, I'm just going to call her Mori, that Mori is aware of and deeply hurt by her mother's secret decision to continue the lowest kind of domestic work. The second phase of her ambition is to turn this small crew and single ship into a major interplanetary shipping concern, one with her at the top, so that she can return to Japan in splendor, retrieve her hard-working and long-suffering mother and siblings, and move them all to some prime real estate overlooking the Pacific in California. An absolute wizard with numbers, she's not only an excellent accountant and financial planner, but she has over a short time won the complete respect and trust of Bolter and is the only person he will listen to regarding business expenses. Only because every time he went with his gut, it was catastrophic, and every time he listened to her brain, it was not. He's frustrated by her slow and steady, consistent approach to wealth creation, and every time she's able to grind a bit of surplus revenue through rigid controls of expenditures, he often spends it on some extravagant item. Because of this, their relationship is at a crisis point. She knows that it would be virtually impossible for someone her age and lack of formal education to be able to to be able to completely control the finances of a small company in order to turn it into a large one. But at the same time, if Bolter's impetuosity continues to set back her efforts, then there's no point in her remaining, and she's been making it clear that she means what she's saying despite her natural lack of forcefulness and innate desire to avoid confrontations. Bolter by now realizes that he cannot succeed without her and might finally be forced to take her seriously enough to find the financial discipline necessary for them to succeed. Maury is an expert at dangling the prospect of the purchase of a Centaurus in order to keep Bolter's spending under control. This is not just a pacifying action for her either. If they could just stick to her plan, the larger ship would increase profit margins significantly and be a major milestone on her road to financial empire. New character. Jessica Thompson, white female, early 50s. Jessica Thompson is the executive officer aboard the Mary Sue. She is not a happy woman. Jessica is on the downside slope of life, and she got on that slope early. Drinking cost her a job at a major shipping line, and now the great mischance has been gnawing away at her for almost 20 years. She's extremely defensive and has become so used to making excuses for every failing that the rest of the crew have invented a fictional character named Bane that they use as shorthand behind her back whenever speaking of whomever Jessica blames for the latest shortcoming or mistake. So why does Bolter continue to put up with her? Well, first, she's an excellent exec, and she seems to have no problem playing bad cop, which appeals to Bolter's distaste for such duties. Second, as a former employee of one of the large shipping lines, she remains fairly well connected, even if those connections are not exactly thrilled at the mention of her name, and deeply understands the corporate mindset that makes up most of Mary Sue's competition. But her one indispensable quality is her ability to negotiate. Quote, a stone-hearted junkyard bitch, unquote, would be one of the milder terms used to describe her. Terrorist, bully, batshit crazy, and hope she dies in a fire would be others. The main thing, however, is that she manages to consistently get the absolute best prices, both buying and selling, and while she is hardly popular, she is certainly respected. There's one other endearing quality that Thompson has, and that is a very sharp, very dark, very acidic, and very, very good sense of humor. Marusha Dark is snoring. Go snore somewhere else, Marusha. Seriously. Gustavo Tavo Miranda, Latino male, mid-20s. Tavo Miranda is the ship's so-called engineer. He's constantly referred to as the so-called engineer because he's essentially a gifted mechanic. He has a good natural understanding of how mechanical systems work, and he's especially good at ad hoc repairs, which often remain in place due to budgetary concerns. His problem is his lack of technical education, which can be a real issue on something as technically complex as a spacecraft. Fortunately, Bolter had picked up a great deal of practical knowledge in this regard, and they are now often found working together, just the three of them. Tavo, Bolter, and a tutorial video on how care and maintenance of the Rockwell QR-47A main engines. While universally known to the crew as Tavo, when working alone with Bolter will often refer to him as Lovely, the result of Tavo once having to explain to Bolter that his last name Miranda means lovely in Spanish. He genuinely fears this information getting out to the rest of the crew. Tavo is a hard worker. More than that, he's a hard study, which is not something that comes easy for him, but which earns him enormous respect from the rest of the crew in general, and Bolter in particular. It is Bolter's constant encouragement that keeps Tavo with his nose in the books, learning the theory behind the mechanics so that someday he can realize his dream of certification and having the so-called permanently removed from his title as engineer. 2 characters ago. James Francis Hook Tarkenton, white male, early 20s. Hook is the security specialist for Mary Sue. At 6'8" and 275 pounds, he makes a very effective backdrop for purchases or other negotiations. He was very briefly a professional football player, but was unable to control his temper and was eventually cut since he wasn't particularly talented to begin with. Hook doesn't have the natural grace of an athlete, and while he's a long way from good looking, he is well aware of the effect his hypermasculinity has on certain types of women in certain types of drinking establishments. He's actually a very simple guy. He wants to see the universe, doesn't much care about money, likes the fact that he's not in a desk job, likes even better the authority that comes from being called a security specialist, and most of all enjoys the idea of liberty as it pertains to sailors throughout history. Hook is not exactly meticulous when it comes to punctuality, and most of the time he seems to be almost as much trouble as he's worth. But he's a good man to have in a tight spot, and while he does not exactly follow orders gracefully or efficiently, he is fearless and loyal and especially protective of Maury, who's perennially terrified of everything and who therefore gives him a sense of importance and meaning. And here's the last character, and I think this one is really interesting. Coleman Cole McManus, white male, early 80s. Cole McManus is likely the oldest person on the entire frontier. Not part of the crew when our story begins, Cole's introduction is, shall we say, rather unique. Prior to their first run, once our story begins, Bolter gets an email from a person who identifies himself as, quote, an old rum runner, unquote. It's a recommendation for a trade route with purchase quotas. He's also copied Maury on the email. Needless to say, Bolter ignores it and goes an entirely different route. A few days after returning from the run, he receives another email listing the actual sell price at the location he recommended and the buy price at the destination he recommended. He seems to know what the Mary Sue is capable of and concludes with what their potential profit would have been and asks him to compare it to what they actually made. This makes Bolter simply angry and he blocks the email address. Maury, however, does not. This continues for several runs. At first, Maury mentions that she's received more recommendations from the old rum runner, but Bolter is convinced the whole thing is a phishing scam. He's been burned before and he never forgives being ripped off, and Maury wisely stops mentioning it. That's until a few months later when she sits with Bolter to look at the financials. They've done a bit better than average, and growth is slow but steady. And then, just before the end of the meeting, she tells him that she'd been tracking the advice that they've been receiving anonymously, and had they taken those recommendations, their profit for the quarter would not have been 12%, it would have been 232%. Neither of them have any explanation for this, but Bolter finally agrees to meet with this Coleman McManus, bringing Maury and Hook along for good measure. What they discover in a rather rundown bar is an old man, grizzled and sunburned, but with subtle clues about what was once a far more respectable and prosperous life. We learn that Cole McManus had once been a chief systems analyst for a major construction company and had been on site in countless instances to help supervise the construction of literally hundreds of facilities, large and small, throughout all of the colonies. Now, as a result of a lifetime spent on the frontier, he's acquired an uncanny ability to know what materials are likely to be needed at what locations and in what order. And since he is working alone, he can process that information significantly faster than it would take the same incredibly expensive corporate AI to reach the same conclusions and push it down through the purchasing chain. Cole is essentially selling his ability to scoop the market. He doesn't want a salary or a contract. He only wants two things: 10% of the gross in cash upon sale, and he wants to go with them, offering to pay his room and board out of his 10%. When Bolter asks why he chose their single small ship organization, Cole replies that he'd sent identical letters to 20 of the top prospects as he saw them, and they were the first ones to reply. When Bolter asks why they were his first choice, Cole replies that they weren't his first choice, they were his seventh choice. Cole claims he can read a company the same way he can read a market. He's looking into all of the crew resumes and sees promise in the Mary Sue, and besides, 7 is his lucky number. At first, they become tremendously successful, but Bolter's occasional attempts to tweak the advice based on his gut draws an explosive reaction from the normally mild-mannered Cole. If he's not willing to listen to the best advice on the market, he'll find a captain who will. This touchiness surprises all of them, but Cole tells them that the Centaurus is in reach, and so the strange old man who watches 6 or 7 video streams at once in the privacy of his cabin gets his chance to get back in the game. Okay, so there it is. That is the essence of one of the story themes. So we got a lot of detail there that we can mine, and I'm looking forward to getting to it. All right, let's get to our questions for today. Here we go. Number 4. TSS questions for 12/15/25 Monday Pop Culture Stream, curated by Ian Nolan. Thank you, Ian. Let's see what we got here. Eric says, interesting. I wonder how much of his backstory the old man isn't telling. Yes, it is kind of interesting, isn't it? So I couldn't believe I'd actually done that degree of work there, but it's good to have some writing in. It gives a lot of material, You can see a lot of conflict just for that one thread out of 5. So, yeah, and Cafficinato says Nostromo S crew dynamics in there. These are the kind of words that make me very, very happy. All right, Ian Nolan. We got an Ian Nolan, got a Marusha Dart, got a Roadrunner, got an Eduardo Enrique, got another Marusha Dart, got an Eric Blake, got a Braden Higby, and that's it. We'll get them all. Ian Nolan. Bill, I don't really have a question, just something incredibly cool in the aviation space worth knowing about. Boom Supersonic just brought a product to market I don't think anyone was expecting. They commercialized their supersonic turbine as an air-cooled natural gas power plant for data centers. How freaking marvelous. Adds $300 million in new funding. So Boom Aerospace is a company that's been working and has flying prototypes, not just vaporware or pixelware, that actually work, and it's the configuration of the craft that makes it so that the boom becomes kind of a thud, and we get supersonic flight, and we can go from LA to New York in 90 minutes instead of 5 hours, which would be nice. In my mind, this is as brilliant as SpaceX's Starlink play and virtually guarantees their success with a longer vision of supersonic transport. Yeah, Ian, just when I feel like, blackpilling myself away and thinking, my God, there's just so much, rampant, aggressive, pride in being ignorant, I look at companies like Boom and obviously Elon Musk's company, Anduril is a great example. There's another couple of other companies that are like that are really doing the American thing better than anybody else in the world. This company like Boom can only exist in the United States, which is kind of what I talked about in my last Right Angle about Still King of the Hill. And the idea that they could dual purpose that is great. I remember when Tesla first unveiled their wall battery, and like everything else, the design was just beautiful. It's just beautiful oval and just hangs on your wall there in your garage or in your whatever room, and it's a battery from the things that Elon used for the Teslas, and it'll power your house. I thought, great. And obviously the genius, I mean, really, you really have to, I know I'm just in danger of being too much of an Elon fanboy, but I don't think it's possible to be too much of an Elon fanboy. It's not just the vision that, hey, we're going to Mars. It's the integration of all of these things, and you would think that you would. In fact, I'm just mystified that he can run SpaceX at all, and I understand he's handed that off to a very capable manager. She's just terrific. But SpaceX is flying rockets, and rockets is expensive. So where are you going to get who's going to be your primary customer? And it turns out that your primary customer is going to be you. You're going to be the primary customer. Most of your launches are going to be to put up these Starlink satellites. Okay, well, if you were putting up traditional satellites, where's your revenue from that? There's no revenue from a weather satellite. There's no direct revenue from, a GPS satellite or, I suppose communication satellites. But with Starlink, he's realized that he will eventually have the lion's share of all of the monthly payments for internet usage across the planet. It's just insanely brilliant. Insanely brilliant. And so, yes, when you see this kind of thing where somebody develops it, a cutting-edge application is not being done anywhere else in the world, no one else is even close. And they look at this, we could pull this out of our rocket and just use it as a very efficient way to generate electricity. Then it's like, now Boom is in the energy business, and that's a big business, and it's a business that's going to keep growing because of the demands of AI. AI is just an energy sink, and it's altogether just really, really brilliant. So I didn't know that, Ian. I was super glad to see it. Boom is one of those companies I'm keeping an eye on, and they're lighter and faster. Darth Chuck says, and GE can't get products to customers fast enough. Exactly. Exactly. This is small, light, and fast. I really love Anduril. It's one of my favorite companies. It started out as a mom and pop defense organization company. Obviously, the guy's got a tremendous background, hired the best engineers, and they're thinking so far outside the box. As far as I know, Anduril is the only company that's really got a feasible plan to deal with drone strikes. You can't shoot these things down. If they send 200 Shahed big drones, and you shoot those down, then they'll send you 5,000 smaller ones. But Anduril understands that there's no way to shoot these things. The thing to do is just generate this microwave pulse, and they just fall out of the sky. It's just a boom. And Anduril is able, apparently, to have so much discretion with this wall that they can specifically exempt their own or friendly assets. I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect that it's something probably very similar to a solid state radar. Used to have a radar dish that would swing, back and forth, up and down. Now it's just an emitter array, and the radar beam is determined by magnetic influence. So probably it's a intense microwave beam, and they just using this array, just zap, 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 skip him, zap, 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 zap. As long as we have companies like this, we will be in great shape. I just think of what they could do if we had a really stripped away the regulatory kudzu and lowered the tax rate. But yes, it's great news, so good to hear. Rushadar, topic, never say never. Bill, last week you said you don't think AGI will ever become a thing. This week, a company based out of Tokyo claims to have cracked AGI. Okay, well, a lot of people have claimed it. It's a picture of an anime-looking robot. It's not a terribly, it says representative image. Okay. Just checking this real quick. All right, so it's up for debate. Back to the question. Admittedly, even I think that's a bold claim, but where you say never, I say sooner than you think, certainly within my lifetime. Maybe even with yours. Well, that's kind of you. Remember, it doesn't have to fit, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be better than humans, and you were once just as skeptical of LLMs and self-driving cars. Well, now I'm more skeptical of LLMs. I'm not skeptical about self-driving cars. I just said I didn't particularly want to be in one. AGI is artificial general intelligence. All the AI systems like ChatGPT and Grok and everything are LLMs. They're large language models. And when you ask it a question, it will respond. And I thought that the thing is sitting there waiting on me to reply, but it only deals with your questions. So if you ask ChatGPT a question, it gives you an answer, and you go away for 3 days and you come back and answer it, ChatGPT doesn't exist in that time. That particular shard of it that's dedicated to you doesn't exist. Okay, so that's basically it. But artificial general intelligence has awareness, and it's got consciousness, and the LLMs most certainly do not. And just to put a button on this, the entire purpose of the AI bubble and the fear of AI was that once you create an intelligence that's smarter than humans, then nobody knows what decisions it's going to make. And a lot of people felt that the LLMs were a pathway there. The guy, I forget his name, who's in charge of OpenAI, who developed ChatGPT, recently said on an interview, "I can't imagine raising a baby without ChatGPT." But I saw an extremely effective analysis of this, and basically what this person is saying is that ChatGPT doesn't know anything. It collates information. It'll hallucinate information it doesn't have. I just spent 2 days working with ChatGPT trying to get this model up to the standards that I wanted in terms of visual imagery. I kept being assured that this would eventually happen, and when it finally didn't happen, it said, yeah, it turns out we can't do that. Scott Ott had this exact similar thing many months ago, he was using, I think it was ChatGPT to write computer code. And so he followed all the instructions of the Super Genius LLM, and it kept failing and kept failing. And Scott said, "Can this be done?" Absolutely. There's no question we can do this. And we'll do this. And after 2 or 3 days, Scott said, "It's not working. I followed your instructions precisely. I just repeated this over the last 2 days with the AI video stuff I showed you at the beginning." And then finally, ChatGPT says, "Oh, I guess I was wrong about that." So this is what we have now is very convincing conversation simulator, and the LLMs are good at collating a lot of data and synthesizing it. So they are certainly useful, no question, but they're not intelligent, and they're certainly not intuitive. They're not able to synthesize ideas. They don't have consciousness. And my argument was, how do we build artificial consciousness? You could argue that ChatGPT is intelligent, Sam Altman, but how do you build artificial consciousness when we don't know what consciousness is? We don't know what consciousness is. Anyway, to go back to Marisha's question, the company in question was formed by an ex-Google veteran, which is significant because Sam Altman just issued a code red response to Google's Gemini's latest model, meaning that the people over at Google are clearly doing something impressive behind closed doors. I'm reminded of a statement by the late Bill Cooper, which is that whatever the public thinks the current state of technology is, the military is probably around 15 to 25 years ahead of that. I don't think that could possibly be that long. We'll see. In order to, like the 6th generation fighter, which I'm glad we're getting, the F-47, has apparently been flying for 10 years. It's one thing to have the technology. It's a whole other thing to build it and fly it and fly the bugs out of it. The Osprey, the V-22 Osprey, which is now in common usage and does what it's supposed to do, vertically take off and land and fly faster than a helicopter. But there was a period of several years there where those things were just crashing all the time. And it really was beginning to look like that it wouldn't make it. In fact, I recall a story from the early days of the F-22 testing phase. And the problem, of course, is that you got 2 turbofan engines, turboprop engines, jet engines that are driving propellers. And if you have an engine failure, and it's just a simple engine failure, then that side just collapses and the plane just goes down and you die. So one of the biggest problems with the Osprey was, how do you engineer the linkage so that if one engine dies, the other engine is able to drive both of those propellers and keep the plane in the air? You have to have, every twin engine airplane has to have a single engine failure mode. And if it doesn't, then all you've done is doubled your chances of having a catastrophic engine failure with 2 engines. Anyway, what I remember hearing was that during some of the earlier tests of this, the engineers were talking with the test pilots. A bunch of test pilots have been killed, and they said that, I don't know if they actually built this as a gag or whether they just told them this, but the story was that on the instrument panel on the Osprey, there was the engineer said, we're going to put a hole right here in the middle of the instrument panel in case of emergencies. And the pilot said, you got to put like a hole in the instrument panel in case of emergency. Is that some button or something? And the engineer said, no, it's an embedded .45 caliber pistol. If you lose one of the engines, it's just going to fire, and you won't have to worry about the emergency anymore. Something along those lines. It sounds like it's got the ring of truth to it. But anyway, back to this. I'm reminded of a statement by the late Bill Cooper, which is that whatever the public thinks the current state of technology is, the military is probably 15 to 25 years ahead of that. His original presentation cited stealth planes as an example, which were known to the Soviet military as early as the 1970s, but the American public didn't become aware of them until the late 1980s. And we now know that even the Nazis had their own prototype version as early as 1944. Okay. The Nazis had a flying wing as well, and we had one too. Northrop developed a flying wing, but it had control issues. And one of my favorite stories in all of aviation is Northrop had a propeller-driven version of the flying wing, and then they built a jet-powered version of the flying wing with Northrop in the 50s or 60s. Just couldn't get it to go. It had, poor control qualities and so on. And then the B-1, which was developed by Northrop, is of course a flying wing. No vertical tail surfaces, no fuselage or empennage or anything. And that they got special clearance for Northrop, who by this point was in his final days, and they got permission to show Northrop the B-2 before he died. So in other words, yeah, you were working on this your whole life, and here it is, dude, and it works really well. So again, the reason I'm nitpicking about this is, the Nazis had a prototype version. Okay, we had a prototype version called Have Blue, I think, which was used angles to deflect the radio beams rather than smooth surfaces. That's what led to the F-117, which was kind of the first generation stealth fighter bomber. It was never a fighter, small bomber. The F-117 came in with a very angular shape and was only controllable due to computerized fly-by-wire electronics. But that particular approach didn't survive. So prototypes are prototypes. Functioning, mass-producible things are something else. Anyway, Mauricio says, I think it's highly probable that the U.S. military already has something very close to AGI from the movie Eagle Eye, or at least the one from Person of Interest, which is both exciting and terrifying, something they will drip feed over time to the public in the coming years. If the military had an artificial intelligence that is smarter than humans, that's the definition of AGI, at least the working definition of it. Artificial general intelligence is generally at least referred to in popular terms as a self-aware, conscious artificial intelligence that surpasses human intellectual capacity, and because it surpasses that, it is able to iterate its next design. Because it's smarter than humans, it can make a second version of itself that is smarter than it is, and then that second generation can be a third generation that's smarter than it is, and now you get further and further and further away from human intellectual capability, and that's the singularity where nothing can be seen beyond that because history changes. Okay, but for that to happen, you have to have something that is actually intelligent rather than informed. If I still have this on my desktop, I will show it to you because it's a fun topic and it's a very, very, very big topic. Yes, I do. Show you something here. Okay, so let me show you the state of AI as it exists right now. This would be good. This would be good for you guys to. I mentioned it before, but it's been a while. So here's where AI exists as of the moment. They did an experiment, and we'll have a little stratosphere type little walk through the forest here. So, looking at human creativity, human intelligence, we have a guy named Johannes Kepler. Kepler is the guy who determined the laws of orbital motion. It was Kepler who realized that the planets move in ellipses instead of circles, and it was Kepler's law that said that any 2 points on an ellipse with the same time period cover the same area. It's a long story, but basically what he was saying is, as things get further away from the sun, or the gravity source, they slow down. As they get closer, they accelerate, and so on and so on. So all of these laws of orbits, all of these structure of orbits, was determined by Kepler, who was using tables composed by a Danish astronomer named Tycho Brahe. Tycho was a character. Tycho got his nose cut off in a duel, and he had a nose that was made of silver and wax. And Tycho didn't do any theoretical work, but Tycho had the most precise measurements of the positions of the planets against the background stars. That's what Tycho had. He had a database. And Kepler went over there and kissed his butt, and Tycho was just incredibly stingy with this data. But eventually Kepler got the actual high quality data, let's say for the planet Mars. Here's the positions of planet Mars on every single day. And so Kepler sat down and Kepler figured out where the positions of the planets were and what the period was and all of this. He was able to derive these laws, and he was able to predict with a high level of precision where the planets were going to be based on the laws that he's come up with, these laws of ellipses and Kepler's laws and so on. But this is the critical distinction. What Kepler did not do and could not do was he did not have a formula that would tell you, because he didn't have any understanding of gravity. This is before Newton. Kepler was able to predict where the next dot would be, but he could not tell you why it was going to be there. That's a critical distinction. I know where the next one's going to be based on the pattern, but I can't tell you why. I can only tell you where. So that's a Kepler. Newton took these laws and was able to formulate his theory of gravity, where if you knew the mass of one object and the mass of the other and the initial speed, then everything you could predict after that would follow Kepler's laws, but he knew why. Newton is a why, and Kepler's only a where. Now, they took an AI system in isolation and they trained it. They gave it the same data that Kepler had. They gave it what Tycho would have given Kepler. In other words, they gave this artificial intelligence the positions of the planet Mars with a high degree of accuracy and asked the AI to predict where Mars was going to be the next time. And it did this with a high level of precision. And everyone went, aha! But what the AI was doing what Kepler did. It was figuring out where it was going to be from its last position. So here's a fun picture for you. Hang on, YouTube. These are the motions for the planet Mercury. If you look on the left, the true force, the vectors on the true force are derived from Newton's law. In other words, if you look at the left, what you find is that each position of the planet Mercury is determined by the pull towards the sun and its orbital speed around the sun. All of the vectors point towards the center of the sun because of gravitational moment. That is Newton on the left. The true force is Newton. On the right is what the AI came up with. And the AI did Keplerism. In other words, the AI take any one position on the pink side on the right. It's assuming that that's the vector, and then it comes up with a new vector to make sure that Mercury is in the right place at the next time, but these vectors are all over the place because it doesn't understand the laws. So the AI was able to predict the positions without understanding the positions, which brings us to another groovy little formula here, which is this one. Oh, hang on. Just bring this in real quick. When they ran this same thing again with the AI, what they found was that the AI did it for all of the planets. I know you can't see much of the details there, but if you look at the ones below there, you can see the Earth is true on the left with the blue. That's what Newton predicted based on Newton's laws. And then the pink ones are the AI trying to figure out what vector you need to apply to this position to get it in the correct next position. And this is the formula. This is the picture that I really love. Let me drag it into both of them here. Okay, so the ground truth law up at the top, force is proportional to mass 1 times mass 2 divided by the radius squared. That is Newton's law. Okay, that's it. That ground truth law applies to everything. Applies to galaxies, planets, stars, everything. That one law is Newton's laws of gravitation. It doesn't include relativistic effects that waited for Einstein, but for the sake of most physics, the ground truth law, force is proportional to m1, m2 divided by r squared, is the actual answer. The estimated laws are what the AI came up with in order to explain the positions of the motions. And you can see that it's absolute garbage. Galaxy number 2, for example, the AI predicted that the formula was force is proportional to the cosine of 2.19 times m1, and it's just making up garbage to try to explain on a frame-by-frame basis what the next picture will be. And that is, come on, oh, sorry. That is the difference between a Kepler and a Newton. Kepler is able to extrapolate from data, but Newton understands the relationship. And here's where it gets really interesting. Really interesting. Once they figured out that the AI language models and so on were not smart enough to develop this rule that a human thought of 300 years ago, Quibo says AI will solve this soon. I disagree. I disagree. And here's why. Once they realized that the AI was only able to estimate, they opened the AI up to the World Wide Web. And even with access to the World Wide Web, the AI was not able to grab Newton's formula out of the AI web and apply it to this problem. It just couldn't do it. So it was doing what the large language models do. It was estimating, it was predicting, and it's very good at that. The reason that AI video looks so good, that the waves and the animation are so good, is it's got billions of examples of waves curling in its video database. And so it can reproduce that, which is a very complex thing to do, very, very complex to get waves to go right. In CGI, it's very difficult with particle systems, doesn't look good, but AI does it perfectly because it's got billions of examples. But it can't make the intuitive leap. It cannot come up with that. So the LLMs like Grok and ChatGPT are never going to get there. And there are different architectures to try to get there, but my point is and remains, look, I'll either be proved wrong about this in my lifetime or I won't, and it will either be proved right or wrong over the course of human history or it won't. But my point is, we don't know what consciousness is. And we had assumed that all you had to do was build a machine with the same number of connections that our brain has, and intelligence will just naturally come out of it. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's really looking like consciousness is a quantum effect that occurs inside microtubules inside the brain, and that, as I said last time, the best theory now is that consciousness is not inside our brain, and not even memories are inside our brain. They are stored in some kind of a quantum cloud, and our brains are quantum modems that allow us to access this information. I really think that's it. Chase Smith has got it exactly. Kepler is equal to knowledge, while Newton is equal to wisdom. Yes, and in order to get to Newton, you have to be able to make an intuitive leap. In the case of Newton, famously enough, and I don't believe this has been actively disproven. I've heard people say it didn't really happen, but at least the story, and it's a great story, is that Newton is sitting in his yard, and he's sitting under his apple tree, which still exists, by the way, and an apple falls to the ground, and he's seen this a million times. We've all seen it a million times. AI has seen it 1 trillion times. But Newton, sitting there, wonders why. Why does it fall? And that inspiration led him on the search for the idea that some kind of force has to be pulling that apple down. And that intuition that occurred from watching an apple fall, to me, is so biological and so whimsical, is a really good word for what I'm looking for. It's so whimsical, it's so illogical, it's so intuitive, it's so serendipitous, that machines that are built on logic can't get there. Serendipitous, like as the waves, same time, pretty much exact same. Spirited, yes. The more that we understand about consciousness, the more I'm tempted to use the word divine. That it is something, when I say supernatural, I don't mean occult. I mean it is something that is so miraculous and so poorly understood, despite all of our knowledge, that you could describe it as divine. And I, at this point, do not believe that you could put that into silicon. I just don't. And certainly the one thing we know for sure is a year ago, and I've been down this path too, where I didn't believe in AI, and then all of a sudden I thought, my God, I've got a 300 IQ friend, and then I realized, no, 300 IQ friend is just a guy who talks like a 300 IQ friend. He's wrong about 10% or 15, 20% of everything he says, and that is a problem. This is one of my favorite comments of all time, ever. Steve Young, AOC, says you should read Newton in the original Vulcan. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. Oh, and Marky Mods gets points too, because the Rings of Power definition is the apple only sees downward. My God, what a pathetically written show. What absolute trash. Okay, so I don't believe that AGI is around the corner. And the reason I don't believe AGI is around the corner is because it seems pretty clear by now that it's not a question of connections, neural connections. It is something that is either supernatural, which I don't think is the... Let me put it this way. I think science will be able to explain it. They may not be able to reproduce it. I actually do believe it's got to do with quantum effects that are happening in microtubules in your brain, which are structures that are uniquely set up for quantum interactions. The guys that are building quantum computers have said repeatedly now that we just barely started working with these things. They say that this computer, and it's not my language, this is theirs, that quantum computers are able to solve things so much, when I say so much faster, millions and millions and millions of times faster than digital computers. And the people that are doing the cutting edge research on quantum computers say that these computers appear to be accessing information from another dimension and grabbing that information from a realm that we did not even expect existed. So there you go. I think it's much more complicated than this, and I believe it's unique. And I'm actually I mentioned this a couple shows ago, Anton Petrov, who does that great astronomy channel. Hello, wonderful person. Love the guy. Did a mathematical analysis of the likelihood of conscious technological intelligence. And the mathematics say that from a purely statistical point of view, the chance of this happening should take 2 or 3 orders of magnitude longer than the lifespan of the sun. And that this explains the Fermi paradox, that some either divine miracle or some cosmic ray zapped somewhere. I read recently that one of these precursors for cognitive imagination is that chromosomes, which are like X chromosomes do this and Y chromosomes do that, but that chromosomes had fused at the end, and that this is not possible, but it exists. And this is where you start to get to really interesting territory. So we'll see. Moving on, Roadrunner NM. Good evening, Bill. Hello, Roadrunner. I'm a little tired of all the doom and gloom in the news. Here's something just for fun to get everyone into the Christmas spirit. How the Sergeant Major Stole Christmas. About 5.5 minutes long. You can watch it later if you're interested. It's right there on YouTube called How the Sergeant Major Stole Christmas. I'm sure it's that kind of super cynical military humor that I just love so much. I just love it so much. Quiba says, look into organoid research. Yeah, they are definitely trying different pathways. I'll tell you this: if they are able to get to superintelligence, I don't know what organoid research is, but I'll bet you, I had to guess, I bet you if they do get to supercomputing artificial intelligence, it will be because they grow a brain, not because they build a brain. It will be a biological... That's a freaking fascinating way of looking at it. It never occurred to me. But yes, if you were going to do it, that's how I would go at it. If I was sitting here today and I had $1 trillion to invest, I would get completely off of the silicon, and I would try to gene splice a biological brain that... Yeah, that's what I would do. That is a brilliant, brilliant idea. Fame Name asked Bill, do you have an extra chromosome? No, I'm actually missing a few, as a matter of fact, as it turns out. And that explains so much. made from stem cells. That I could believe. They're building brains out of cells and then building computers with that brain. It is happening. Okay, that changes my complete analysis on it, because my argument has been from the beginning that intelligence is biological, and if it turns out they are working on a biological solution, then I retract my disbelief in the ability to do it, but maintain my disbelief in their ability to do it in terms of silicon. So anyway, so there's that. How Sergeant Major Stole Christmas, so that might be good. My question is, Die Hard a Christmas movie? You know, I've never understood this argument. I know it is. It generates more passion than just about anything in the world, but I've never ever gotten into it. I've seen Die Hard one time, and this is a subject that has divided nations, and I'm not getting into this fight. I am. You can just consider me Schrodinger's critic on this one. Die Hard is a Christmas movie, and it is not a Christmas movie. So there you go. Quibo says it's currently as smart as small monkeys, going back to the biological brain. Last he checked. This is where I'm going to come back to this because I think it's so interesting. We share 98% or somewhat more of our DNA with chimps. Chimps are extremely intelligent animals, and arguably the second most intelligent, maybe it's the bonobos, but arguably the second most intelligent animals on the planet after humans. Dolphins have a high level of intelligence, but it's not really quite the same thing. A lot of their brain power goes to their sonar and stuff. But the difference between us and chimps is really different. I really want to get into this. Yeah, I guess I do. All right, so let's just close the book on chimps and talk about humans. I do not know whether this is hardware or software. I will preface this discussion by saying I'm not making the case for either. I just think it's an interesting observation. So this could be either hardware or software or both. I don't know, and I'm not selling a story. But there is something unique. I was talking with Shelley about this earlier. There is something unique about white males that is difficult to understand or get a handle on. Virtually all of the inventions in the world, essentially all of them, were done by white males. And there are, if you buy the genetic intelligence argument, there are groups of humans that are more intelligent than white males as an average IQ. Asians are, if the white IQ baseline is 100, Asians are somewhere between 103 and 105, which means they've got a slight advantage in intelligence, and Ashkenazi Jews are apparently 115, 120, which is at least a standard deviation smarter than the average white Caucasian. But there's something about white males, and there's no question that this is true, because we live in a free society that not only allows anybody to go wherever they want to in terms of their career choices, but there are social engineering programs in place that are pushing people in a certain direction. And I'll give you the example that I'm thinking about, and that is aviation. When we do the colonies, I'm going to have the every single iteration of woke science fiction is contraindicated by facts. So when you look at like the bridge on Strange New Worlds, there's one white male there, and then everybody else on the bridge that I can see is female, and then you've got this effeminate Vulcan. All right? But if you go to a flight school 95% of the people at that flight school are going to be white males. And anybody can go to that flight school. I took a look at the statistics, and currently in commercial aviation, professional airline pilots, I think the number is 94% of them are white males, and I think 6%, 5 to 6% are females, and also the statistics break down so about 4 or 5% of them are black. But Starfleet Academy, right? So stay with me on this, right? I know this is third rail kind of conversation, but I'm not afraid to explore the truth based on the evidence. So here's one thing I think we can say with a certain amount of confidence. Whatever the reason is, having been to a number of flight schools and having in fact worked in flight schools, I can tell you with a 100% certainty that there is no sense of get out of here, you're black, or get out of here, you're a woman. On the contrary, there are enormous societal pressures to get women pilots into airlines. I think it was Delta or United said that we're not hiring any more white males. I think the Royal Air Force said we're not hiring any more white male pilots. Put that aside for a minute. When you go to a flight school, which anyone can attend, what you find is at least 9 out of 10 of those people, probably 95 out of 100, are white males. And I don't know how to explain this. If you look at just IQ, what you find is that Ashkenazi Jews are highly overrepresented in the really deep intellect stuff. In the for example, they're I don't know what they are in terms of the percentage of the world's population, but it's something like 25% of the total Nobel Prizes in science and medicine. We're not dealing with peace prizes or literature or any of the rest of it. They are grossly overrepresented in stuff like deep science, and the genetic evidence seems to indicate that they have a higher base IQ than white males, but they don't show up as a general rule in things like advanced aviation. And so the question is, what is it about white males that makes them so attracted to this combination of high but not top level intelligence and also stuff that requires risk, excitement, emotional control, all of those things? I don't know. But it's indisputable. And my final case of evidence on this, because I always test my belief systems against the alternative. What is it a question of representation? Is it that blacks or women don't see themselves on the screen as much? Well, those days have gone. But here's my strongest piece of evidence that there's something unique about this. If you look at the SpaceX launches, SpaceX has, at least in their Hawthorne launch control facilities, they've got the guys that are in the control room, and then there are, Roadrunner says Ashkenazi Jews are too smart to become pilots. I think there actually might be something to that. I really do. Then there's this glass barrier, and on the other side they open the doors, and for a big launch like a Starship launch or the Falcon Heavy launches, that comes down to who gets there first. There's nobody outside of SpaceX saying no blacks, no women. It's who gets there first. And if you look at the composition of the people that go to watch these launches at SpaceX live, you're going to find it's not quite 90%, but it's pushing it. It's to me it looks like high 80, 85, maybe 90% of the total people there are young white men, because this is what they're interested in. The same thing goes for the people that become engineers. It works the other way too. If you go to an equestrian event, which I've been to once with my friend Fritz, who has a bunch of horses and does historical reenactments with them, you go to an equestrian event and you're going to find 90% of the people there are white females. And again, there's no gatekeeping there. It has to be explained by some kind of biological preference because there's no gatekeeping. So what is it about this that is such an interesting combination, because it seems like that mental combination of a high enough level of intelligence and imagination and risk taking and physical courage, because physical courage is a big part of it. Physical courage is a big part of aviation, especially in your early days. And there's some kind of, well, this is what Tom Wolfe said. What is the right stuff? John Pershing says he would suggest cultural versus biological. I kind of want to agree, but there's no cultural barriers. In other words, all the doors are open. And with all the doors open, you find that 9 out of 10 women are going into the same professions today that they went into 60, 70, 80 years ago. There's an attractor. There's something there. And I don't know what it is, but it's really interesting set of traits. It's a preference, says Chevelle, yes. Now, certainly, now here's a possibility. Flying is not cheap. You have to have money to do it. However, I learned to fly, and I didn't have any money at all. I learned to fly. The reason I learned to fly was because I was willing to live in the worst place I ever lived in my life, which is Palmdale, California. And I lived in Palmdale, California for 2 years, and I worked at the glider port, and I was in the desert, in the Mojave Desert. It was 125 degrees outside, and I was raking rocks for $50 a day, if I recall, and rooming with my flight instructor and the tow pilot. And in exchange for raking rocks and hooking up and launching gliders out there for 2 years, I got free instruction, and then I got a certain number of hours in a glider. So I wanted it enough so that it wasn't like, oh, I can't do it because I'm not rich. Well, I have to find a way to do it. So I don't know. I just find it to be very interesting. So anyway, that's how the future is going to look for me. Aussie Drone Guy says women were earning university degrees since the 1800s. Women are by far the largest number of college graduates now, but their degrees tend to be in the same kind of things as they always were. There's not a whole lot of women engineers, and I think in the case of men and women, it's clearly a distinction between how their brains are constructed. Anybody who wants to argue about this is got an uphill fight. And if you start arguing the exceptions, then you lose. Men have a ability to focus and concentrate and laser focus on something. This property is essential for something like engineering. And as we all know, what engineers use for personality is, for birth control is their personalities, right? There are women engineers, but even the women engineers don't seem to be quite as obsessed with things in their off hours as the men are. There's a kind of it's certainly a form of Asperger's to have that level of focus. But I just know a lot of engineers, and they have this burning desire to build things, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of it. So I wanted to set this all up to go back to what I was talking about, which is I'm just going to tell you what I saw. About 2 months ago, there was a woman academic. This is an African woman who lives in Africa. She's not an African American, she's an African woman. And she was talking about the general mindset of her culture. Nobody was commenting on her culture. She was talking about her culture. Again, I don't know if this is hardware or software. I find it interesting. What she said was, to the African way of thinking, and this applies to a lot of places in Asia as well. In fact, it applies to virtually all of the third world, which is a multiracial place, which is what makes me think there's kind of a freakish sort of an exception to humanity in our case. But what she said was, speaking as an anthropologist who is an African, lives in Africa, said that the African mind doesn't think of time the way that the Western mind does. She said that as far as the cultural African thinking, the future, the way that the West understands the future, doesn't really exist. They understand that something has to happen tomorrow. This is how they perceive time. She said, the reason you see so many people sitting around doing nothing is, she said, they are waiting for time to happen. They're waiting for an event to happen, and that event is a milestone in their perception of time that recedes into the past, but there is no understanding of the future the way that we in the West think of the future. That time is a river that flows past people, and that the things that motivate and activate them are based on something happening to them. And this is what she talked about. There were other Africans talking about how they don't have a word for maintenance. They have a word for repair, but that maintenance, the idea that you would put work into something that wasn't broken to make sure it doesn't break, has a relationship to the ability to imagine into the future. And it apparently isn't there for whatever reason you want to assign to it. That is a remarkable distinction on our part, not on their part. There's nothing wrong with them, nothing wrong with the third world. The world has always been that way. But this idea that certain kinds of consciousness, I'll give you another example. And happily, this one we can take out of Africa. I thought his name was Pierre Boulez, I think. The guy who wrote The Bridge Over the River Kwai is based on a true story. And I never forgot this. So for those of you who, excellent movie. For those of you unfamiliar with the movie or the story, just as a refresher, here's what Bridge Over the River Kwai is about. There's a railroad, a Japanese supply railroad. I think this is in Burma. And there is a British prisoner of war camp. I think most of these guys were probably from the fall of Singapore. And in the story, the novel and the movie, the plot is that the British, who are prisoners and being humiliated by the Japanese on a daily basis, because Japanese culture finds surrender to be completely dishonorable, the fact that they surrendered makes them subhuman to begin with. So the British prisoners cannot respond with force, Pierre Boulez. And so what the British prisoners decide to do is they're assigned by the Japanese the task of going out and building this bridge over this river, called the River Kwai, and the British decide, we're going to show these Japanese bastards how we are superior to them by building the kind of bridge that they are not only never built before, but are not capable of building. We're going to provide ourselves with morale and pride and a survival desire and all of these things that get you through it by building the kind of bridge that they have never seen before. And this will be our passive-aggressive way of saying we're better than you are, because they're getting the living crap beaten out of them, executed on a daily basis, dying of starvation and dysentery and all the rest. So the plot marches along. It's a great plot. And sure enough, the British go out there and build this amazingly advanced bridge out in the middle of the jungle. And it's only right at the very, very end of the movie when the British commandant of prisoners, an allied team, is sent in to blow up the bridge, because this is a major Japanese supply line, and that supply line has been cut because there's no bridge. And the British are not just building a bridge, they're building an amazing bridge. So they have to go blow up the bridge. And in the movie with Alec Guinness, he is collaborating with the Japanese to protect his bridge against the saboteurs, because he's got so much invested in the bridge. But at the very, very end of it, I mean, like in the last moments of his life, he realizes, oh my God, what we've done is help the Japanese war effort, and they blow up the bridge and so on. But now to the point. Pierre Boulez, I don't remember if it's in the novel exactly or whatever, but this is almost verbatim what he says. He says that the Asian mind would be, we need a bridge, so they would send troops out into the jungle, and the troops would just hack down bamboo, just hack it down, bind it together, set it up, build a plank over it, do all these other things, basically hack this bridge together. and the bridge would support the weight of the train, and the train would go over there 10, 15, 20 times, at which point the bridge would collapse, and then they would stop, and then they had to go out and send more troops out there and hack together another bridge, and this was the Japanese way of doing things. And this was true of Japan up until the end of the war. What Boulay said was that the Westerners, in this case the British, I never forgot this phrase in the course of my life since I read it. He said, the Western mind is different. They said that the British built the bridge in their head before they ever went out into the jungle. And he got into details about that. Before they ever sent any troops out there, they sat down in a room, they assigned, or they polled the prisoner base of the people that they had and started to categorize what these guys were good at. Some of these guys had been miners, some of these guys have been engineers, some have been draftsmen, some whatever, right? So the first thing they do is they break down the British prison population into specialty teams. And then they sit down and they figure out what this bridge has to do. So instead of sending troops out in the jungle and hacking away with machetes at bamboo, they send guys out there with these poles. They start hammering these poles into the sand, and they're taking a measurement of how much weight that particular ground can support. And then they bring it back, and the guys have the mathematics, and they have the scale this thing up. So they basically say, okay, we're going to need this much area, this many supports, because this is what this sandy ground will hold. And if we don't have enough, it's just going to topple over. And if we have too much, it's just wasted effort. So they start to get the basics together. And meanwhile, other teams are working on things like, what do we do in what order? In other words, we got to clear the jungle before we can send the supplies out there. What order do we need to send the supplies? It's pointless to send the scaffolding before you send the foundations. And so they broke all that down. And then they would sit down with their drawings, and the drawings were a very precise blueprint of the bridge in their mind, and they would criticize it relentlessly and without regard to loss of face. You know, if a higher ranking guy said this and you knew it wasn't true, you would say, no, sir, I'm sorry, it won't take that weight, and so on and so on and so on. And so finally, they went out and they built this Western style bridge in the middle of the jungle, and it would be alive today if it were still around. Now, John Pershing points out what I think is an extremely important point that goes against the biology aspect. And I think this is a really critical point, at least in terms of some of the populations, because that's how the Asians, he said the Asian mind, he probably said the Oriental mind, that's how it works. Hack it together. But Japan was so decisively defeated. And by the way, when U.S. troops first occupied Japan right after they surrendered, the U.S. troops just couldn't believe how primitive day-to-day society in Japan was. Their munitions plants, they were taking Zeros out of factories and pulling them into locations by donkeys. Mules would pull these finished Zeros along a dirt road to where they'd be hidden, and then they'd get them to it instead of stacking them on a train and all this other stuff. Right? But as John Pershing points out, that the Japanese defeat in World War II was so overwhelming that it rewired the Japanese. The Japanese had already learned their lessons from World War I, or prior to World War I, in the Battle of Hiroshima Straits, when they beat the Russians. Japan used to be an agricultural society. They saw what the West was doing. They saw that the West was advancing so far beyond them, and the Japanese, unique among the Asian powers, adopted these Western methods. They won this big battle against the Russians, completely destroyed the Russian fleet. World War I, they weren't too involved in. By the time they got to the beginning of World War II, they knew they had better technology than we did, so they decided to attack the Americans, thinking that we were soft and weak and we would just basically hand them Hawaii. They never wanted to invade the United States. They wanted the Western Pacific, and there they go. But they had underestimated us. And so by the time the war ends, well, in 1942 and into early 43, we had one functional aircraft carrier in the Pacific. For a 4 or 5 month period there, it was the USS Enterprise, and that's all there was. And the crew of the Enterprise said that at the moment the Pacific War consists of USS Enterprise versus the Empire of Japan, and that's not really an exaggeration. We had one carrier out there for about a 4-month period. A year and a half, 2 years later, when the war ended, we had 33 aircraft carriers. 33, including escort carriers. And we're cranking out these Essex-class aircraft carriers, by far the best carriers of the war. We were so mechanized that by the time we were getting towards the last year of the war, by the time we were getting to the end of 44, 45, if there was an airplane that was damaged, they wouldn't repair it, they just push it overboard, because the new replacements were coming in so fast. So all this to say that there is a way of looking at the world, and it is an argument against genetics that the Japanese were able to not only adopt our system, but to beat us with our own system. And this is, see, I got a really smart audience here. Alan Matthews says, William Edward Demings revolutionized Japan in the modern era. They had sound philosophy, but poor methodology. Yes, Demings was an American who had the idea that quality was the single most important, that the product was quality. You think you're making cars? No, you're making quality. And Demings took that philosophy to American car companies in the years after World War II. And American car companies said, piss off. We're Ford, we're General Motors, we've just manufactured we're the arsenal of democracy. We've manufactured the world's motor industry. We don't need to improve because we're king of the hill. Well, and they were. So Ford and GM and all these American companies are going on just making cars, and the cars are getting worse and worse and worse because there was no real competition, because we had GM and GM was GM. It was GM. But Demings' philosophy was picked up by the Japanese, who after World War II had nothing, and they adopted his methodology into all of their post-war industry. And that is why made in Japan used to be an absolute joke. If it was garbage, we'd say it's made in Japan, it's made in China now, for the same reason. But Demings, Phyllis Knudsen says, Demings' methodology enabled the arsenal of democracy to be so overwhelming. The Japanese took the exact techniques that had beaten them into absolute submission and did it better than the people that had beaten them in World War II. So World War II ends in 45. By the time you get to 1975, I would say certainly at the beginning, by 1975, Japanese cars are getting to be better than American cars. By 1985, they're much better. By 1995, they're much, much better. And then somewhere around 2000, American manufacturing began to get the message and started building much better cars. The Camaro that I got in 2012 and my current Camaro, which is a 2018, extremely well manufactured car. But the Chevy Vega that we had and the Plymouth Sunfire or whatever were just plain aluminum block trash. So anyway, all of this spins out of whether you can build a biological computer that is artificial general intelligence, and you could probably make the case that you can. All right, I'm running way long here, but we'll get it done. So back to Roadrunner, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? It isn't, it isn't. He says, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. I hope you and Natasha have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you very much. We're going to have a Merry Christmas to all of you as well. And he also says, P.S. Happy birthday to Dick Van Dyke, who turned 100 on Saturday. And I love Dick Van Dyke. And Dick Van Dyke on the Dick Van Dyke Show, to me, is along with Jimmy Stewart, and I don't know if I can think of any others, but Jimmy Stewart and Dick Van Dyke in their prime were, to me, the archetypical Americans. And Dick Van Dyke on the Dick Van Dyke Show was just 1960s America, as good as it gets. So there you go. Eduardo Henrique. Bill, it's been a while, and I'm eager to see you move ahead with the colonies and would suggest Juan AI. I've seen Juan AI, and it's one of several ones that I've got. There's 25 different engines out there, and I'm trying to use the ones that are best for the particular task. You could start a video straight from the first frame, allowing you to chain them seamlessly, using the final frame to start the next one. Yes, this is a great video focused on AI with incredible features. Hope you like it. And he gives me a link, which I will open and then, whoops. Yes, there are a bunch of competitors, and there's actually something now called the AI leaderboard, which is constantly updating because new things are released pretty much almost every week, certainly every month, and so they're constantly doing all this, and so I have to stay on top of the technology as well as the artistic end of it. So thanks for that. Appreciate it very much, Eduardo. Good to hear from you again. Marusha Dark, topic Beyond Journey's End. In my continuing efforts to get you an anime, here's something I might pique your curiosity. In your continuing efforts to get me to accept that pink is my favorite color, yeah, let's continue. The series Frieren Beyond Journey's End is in many ways a return to the traditional medieval European fantasy adventure. Here's a link. Let me just see what we're talking about here. Yes, it's anime. With sword and sorcery, elves, dwarves, dragons, and dungeon crawling, very D&D, but it's also unlike any story I've seen or read in the sense that it's the tale of what happens after the main quest had ended, after the hero's journey to defeat the big evil guy, as opposed to being about the journey itself. The legacy of the heroes, their memories, the fallouts of their actions, and what do those immortal beings who outlive the others do after the adventure is over. Imagine if Tolkien had written a story 100 years after the scouring of the Shire, when the elves have nearly all returned to Valinor, when Aragorn and Sam have grown old and died, when only one or two people are left on Earth who can even recall the Eye of Sauron. This is the sort of thing in context which within Frieren begins. In all, it's very cute, wholesome, moving, and hilarious, and has a very relaxed pace, giving a sense of weight to the passage of decades, although there's plenty of action, character development, and world building as well. It's also short, only 28 episodes on Netflix, only 28. I think you and Natasha would really, really enjoy it. Can't recommend it enough. I know several people who say it's their favorite show. Let me just say this again, because apparently I'm not getting through. I have never denied that that anime has some great stories. Clearly, to have the cultural penetration that it has, anime has to have a lot of things going for it, and I've heard that many of the stories and the storylines and different franchises of anime are terrific stories. I don't care. I hate the style. I hate looking at it, and there is no way to convince me out of it. I find it to be personally very childlike. But you can disagree with me on that. You can disagree with me on any of it. You can be the biggest the biggest anime fan in the world, and I respect you for it, and I understand it. It is a personal, aesthetic difference, and I just can't stand it. I don't like the big eyes. I don't like the tiny mouths. I don't like all of the tale that follows maybe the great anime. I don't like the whole Japanese girls who are 14 years old commanding starships in their little Japanese sailor girl outfits. I don't like any of it. And even if you don't have those elements of it, it is an artistic style that I don't find attractive. I'm trying to think of an artistic style that I do find attractive. Disney animation, for example. Classical Disney animation. I'm not an enormous fan of it, but it's certainly watchable and has its moments and it's beautiful. I can't stand what has become the Pixar template. The rounded character faces. We all know what a Pixar character looks like. I can't stand it. I just hate it. And that's just a matter of taste. Some people like Renoir, and some people like Picasso. And I just don't like the way it looks. And it's not gonna change. I think the best case scenario is there's probably a bunch of great anime timelines and stories that could turn into either great live action stuff or something like Into the Spider-Verse. No, I'm not a big fan of animation, frankly. I'm just not. 3D animation appealed to me only to the degree that it looked realistic. And even now, the most realistic CGI that I've seen is just unwatchable to me because of how far it falls below AI video in terms of realism. There's a lot that happens in CGI animation that's great, and I'm going to have to do CGI for all of the spaceships and the exteriors because AI just can't do that. Hard surface things like habitats and all that other stuff, very difficult. I'm going to be playing with, in the break between now and New Year's, I'm going to be playing with Nano Banana Pro. Allows you to take an FBX file, which means you can import a three-dimensional object into a video AI thing and it will generate an image. But having tried it as a test, it rendered garbage because the image I gave it had textures on it, had lots and lots of little details. The AI doesn't need that. Just give it the basic forms and the AI will put the details on there. So that's one of my next experiments. I'm going to hook up my PC here and get back to that. Chase Smith 4121 says you like blondes over brunettes. She may have a wonderful character, but you prefer blondes. It's that simple. It's a Ginger or Marianne thing, and and it's not something that I can be talked out of because I don't want to be talked out of it. It's a preference. My favorite color is silver, and my second favorite color is electric blue, and I like silver and electric blue together, but. You're not going to talk me into yellows, and you're not going to talk me into brown, and you're not going to talk me into pink, no matter how many great things you make, pink or brown or yellow. Eric Blake. Yes, Quibo. You can take an AI, well, let me be clear, compared to what you said, there is software that will take an AI image and turn it into a 3D object. It's a little wonky, but it works. But a better way to think of it is, apparently you can go out, get a CGI model, bring it into Nano Banana, and it will render it. I haven't tested it yet, but it's worth looking at. Roger Ramjet, Johnny Quest first, last and only. Glad you mentioned that before I move on, because Johnny Quest was the only animated show that I genuinely loved the look of. And that's because it was going for realism, really trying hard. The frogmen on board that floating wreck in the derelict ship in the Sargasso Sea. There were moments in the Mummy and stuff where I just thought, it's really cool. So there you go. Eric Blake, Braden Higby. Okay, we're good to go. Eric Blake. Everybody's waiting for the man with the hat. Better watch out now. Okay, so everybody sit down. Brace yourselves. Here it comes. Eric Blake says how I feel about baked beans, for example. I'm sure it's great, but I'm not going to like it. I love baked beans. And you will love them too, Eric. I'll talk you into it. Tonight, the remarkable case of the Christmas collage, or college. We'll find out. So, Bill, there's been a lot of considerable misconceptions regarding the origins of the Christmas we celebrate every day on December 27th. Saturnalia this, pagantry that. Well, submitted for your approval is a little chart from our apologetics master, Wes Huff, laying out a quick historical debunk of the major claims to that effect. It's the image link at the bottom of this post. Bon appetit. Christmas is not a pagan holiday, and apparently lots and lots of evidence tracing everything back. Well, certainly Santa Claus was a saint, so there's that aspect to it. So big old tree of data there. He's also done a video where he goes into debunking in greater detail sources and so on. Now, a subject he doesn't tackle there, you'll notice, is the origin of the Santa Claus mythos. Our friends at PragerU have a quick look at that one, and here's another link to a video about the amazing history of Christmas, and I'll leave that up, take a look at it later, okay? There are more details on that too, but can we tackle that another time, as you'll eventually get to your Christmas Truth Bombs episode? But suffice to say, conservative Christian kids can enjoy the perfect third option. I myself was sure to take way back. Do you believe in Santa? Of course I believe in St. Nicholas. Bit of an early Christmas present, but enjoy nevertheless. Yes, so I think that the truth is obviously in the middle, but closer to one end than the other. One extreme is that Christmas is the definitive definition of the birth of Christ, and that especially things like the traditional carols, the ones that I like, are the ones from the Victorian era. You know, God bless you, merry gentlemen, and Deck the Halls, and all of those. I just love those carols, and the whole invention of Christmas as not the invention, interpretation of Christmas as Dickens did in A Christmas Carol. Christmas Carol locked a lot of Christmas iconography into the culture. Coca-Cola invented the modern Santa Claus. I think that's really largely true. That jolly old elf in the red suit and so on. Snoopy versus the Red Baron. I love Snoopy versus the Red Baron. I could sing that song right now. That Snoopy versus the Red Baron song. All of this stuff is there. The Christmas tree, some people claim, has pagan and Druid roots. The date, I believe historians generally agree that Christ was born in the spring, and that the reason it was moved to December 25th is very close to December 21st, which is the winter solstice. That's been celebrated by all cultures around the world. It's where the sun gets at its lowest point in the seasons, and the sun gets lower and lower and lower and lower and lower every day till the 21st of December, at which point it starts getting higher again. So there's been a lot of cultures that have celebrated that as a rebirth because the sun didn't just go away. So there's that. The pagan term for this was the Saturnalia, so basically. There's the Christmas is 100% Christian holiday. The cynical view, which is no, Christmas is got essentially nothing to do with Christ. It's just all of it's been just hacked together by old pre-existing pagan religions. And I kind of agree with you from what you're arguing here, Eric, that the truth is probably much closer to Christmas being a very largely Christian-based holiday. And so there you go. Two quick questions in the text here. I want to grab real quick. I'll deal with the one that we just finished. I'll just do it real quick. Michael Harvey says, "Bill, did you like the animated Star Trek? I could not stand the animation. If there was ever a subject that I would like animation to, it would have been the animated Star Trek. But I despised the animated Star Trek. I can't watch it. It's so cheap. It's so lazy." The laziest aspect of the animated Star Trek is the fact that they didn't go to the trouble to put the whites in their eyes. They put a skin color over everything, and then there's black lines to indicate the eyes. But if you look at the animated Star Trek, there's no whites in their eyes. I hate it. I have heard, I remember those days very well, and next time maybe for a Christmas show we'll talk about the early days of Star Trek fandom when I got involved, 73, 74. So this is about halfway between the end of the series and the beginning of the first Star Trek movies. But I've heard that some of the stories in the animated series were actually pretty good, but I cannot watch it. I can't. I hate it. Lower Decks can burn in hell, Quibo. This idea of turning Star Trek into like a meta joke for Zoomers to laugh at, okay, fine. There's nothing I can do about that. All I can do is start fresh. And that's what we're going to do. So the other question was, and I've been asked this once or twice before, Fame Name says, "Bill, do you play an instrument?" I believe I do. Most musicians would disagree. I actually learned to play drums. And I always wanted to play drums. And I mentioned this before too, but it's been a while. So my entire life, I have felt that I've had zero musical ability up until just before I met Natasha. Zero. Tin ear, and I couldn't sing a note. My friend Steve Stipp, on the other hand, was a musical genius who could sit down with a guitar, piano, anything, and hear it once, just reproduce it. Wrote songs, wrote music, and was an amazing artist. It still is an amazing artist. Can draw anything. So I just live in freaking awe of his artistic talents, which I considered I had essentially none of. But I just liked the idea of playing the drums. And when I went back to Gainesville the second time, I went to school there from 79 to 81 or 82. Then I went down to South Florida, came out to LA, did the flying thing, and then I went back to Gainesville in '93, spent another 5 years there. So I made UF the next generation kind of thing. Went back the second time, and I got to be friends with this woman who was a painter, an artist, and she played drums, and she taught me the basics of how to play drums, and I got to the point where I could differentiate motion between left foot, right foot, left hand, and right hand. That's the hard part, is unlinking your limbs. The same thing for flying a helicopter, by the way. It's just something. It's muscle memory. It's impossible until suddenly it's not. I started playing drums, and the first song I started playing drums to was Mustang Sally, because I really like that. One of these lazy moments, you know, and then dunk, 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 dunk. So I would play to songs, and I learned how to read, drum chart, and so on. So here's the fair analysis of my drum playing skills. There was a guy in Gainesville named Gunner, and Gunner was a mechanic, and I want to say he was probably about my age, maybe a little bit older. At the time, I was probably 30, early 30s, and Gunner had a garage way out towards Gainesville Airport. I mean, way, way away from downtown, in an industrial park. It was nobody there at nighttime, and Gunner had been a musician, and Gunner liked to work during the nights instead of during the days. He might have had people work in the shop in the daytime, but Gunner liked to be there at night, all night. So Gunner's garage was a place where he had enough floor space to work on 2 or 3 cars at the same time, and off to the side he'd built a loft, and up in the loft was a pair of drum kits, a number of beat-up old guitars, a couple of other instruments, and people could drop by Gunner's anytime, and usually during the weekends, but a lot of time during the week as well. And if Gunner wasn't super busy at the time, he'd just put down his tools and go up there and just jam for a while, because Gunner was I met him once. He was just a really cool dude. And Gunner's garage was a thing, man, and it was one of the best things that I ever was a part of, even though I was not a deep part of it. Anyway, to make a long story short, my friend Steve, who can play anything, lived in Orlando. I was in Gainesville. He was helping me with a parody of Toy Story that I was doing for Gator Growl, which was '94, so shortly after Toy Story had come out, and I had just started in computer animation, and Steve was helping me with a lot of the modeling and stuff. So Steve comes up to Gainesville, and we go to Gunner's garage, and Steve had been in the Air Force. He was an air traffic controller, and then he auditioned for and made it for Tops in Blue, which is the Air Force touring band. So Tops in Blue would go all around the world, various bases, and they just play for the guys. They're just part of the R&R morale team and stuff. Tops in Blue is a really good band. I mean, if you got the entire U.S. Air Force to recruit from, and you're pulling 10, 15 guys out of that, you got some really good musicians there. Steve is a great musician. So we go up to to Gunner's place, and I'm really nervous because I have never played with other people before, and especially with Steve there. So we played a couple of tunes, and there was another guy there, came in after like 1 or 2 songs, and he got on the drums, and he was much more experienced than I was, and he was laying in all these fills, and I couldn't do any fills. But we started getting out of sync, and I started feeling like really bad about that. So the song ended. This guy walked away for a second, and I went up to Steve. I said, "Dude, man, I just feel so bad. I really feel awful. It's like I really screwed up the song for everybody." And he said, "You weren't the one that was making a mistake. You were right on the beat. He was the one who was out of time." And that was, hey Gary, that was one of the great moments of my life. It was like when I got my call sign. It was just one of my favorite moments because I respected my friend so much for this. And he said, "No, you were dead on the time." So here's my fair analysis. I think this is a reasonable analysis of my drum playing skills. I can keep a beat, and I can pump energy into a beat. A good drummer can inject energy into what is normally just clock time, just by sheer physical energy on it. So I can keep beat. I can move a song, but I know almost no fills. So I guess the best way to put it is, I could certainly ever play lead drums, but if somebody needed a tick clock, a metronome, I probably could get by. And I haven't done it in 25, 30 years, but I like doing it a lot. It was fun. Many, many years later, just before Natasha, I was seeing somebody who was a singer, and I was humming something, and I've got very bad, voice just breaks all the time. But I was humming a tune or something, and she said, "You got that note for note?" And we did a couple of, sort of experiments. We just humming a tune rather than singing it, and she said, it's not perfect pitch. Perfect pitch can tell you exactly what note it is. I couldn't do that, but if I knew the song, I knew what the notes were, and people with a tin ear can't do that. And she said, "No, you've actually got a pretty good ear." And so I practiced on my own. I practiced singing a couple of songs, and if I take the time to warm up my voice, because keep all of my tension here. Is that relative pitch? Thank you. Keep all of my tension here. Zoe is an amazing drummer. Zoe is phenomenal. P7 2017 just mentioned Zoe. Zoe's astonishing. But practicing singing, if I spent the time to warm up my voice and really loosen up my voice, my actual voice, my singing voice, is actually down here someplace. It's actually, it's much lower. And I think the reason that I don't talk in this tone is because I can't hear myself over my tinnitus. But this is my natural register. My entire life, I've just basically cranked up my voice by a couple of octaves because I can't hear myself, and so normally I speak in a pitch that only dogs can hear. But if I loosen up my voice and go and stay there, then I can handle a couple of tunes, and the two that I practiced on a couple, but the two that I practiced on, well, many years ago I was singing La Bamba, and I could hit the notes in La Bamba, and then what was it? We'd do karaoke with my friend Alex, and we could do Unchained Melody, and my other friend Rocket, who died several years ago of cancer, I don't even think he was 40 yet, was the best comedy mind I ever saw. We used to sing The Lion Sleeps Tonight, which was fun. But the two songs I really worked on hard, that I gave a lot of effort to, were Hot Rod Lincoln, and that's a tough song to learn because I can't think of another example, but Hot Rod Lincoln is the only song that I can think of that doesn't have a refrain. Every single verse stanza is different. No line repeats itself in Hot Rod Lincoln. There's a musical interlude, but there's no, so you got to remember it's like 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, something like that. And the one song that I actually put a lot of work into was Michael Bublé's version of Come Fly With Me. And if I warm up my voice and I stay in this register, I can really knock that song out. And Bublé hits, I'll mess it up here, but when he does this, he does the first round very traditionally. And then when he goes around for the second stanza, he starts to play around with the style. And the first time he sings it, it's so perfect for a flying honeymoon, they say. But the second time he goes, it's so perfect, and he just goes up, and I can nail that song. And I was dating somebody else at the time who was also a music teacher, And every time I hit that note, she just smiled because it was really tough to hit. So that was the story of that. And I said, if I can maintain this voice for the rest of the night, that'd be great. And if I can maintain it from forever, if I'd run this voice my entire life, I'd run the world by now. But nope, I don't talk down here because it's just lazy. Mac the Knife I can sing. But this is my natural speaking voice, and it's tragic because I really like the sound of this now. But that's not how I talk. I actually talk up here, and it's dumb. I could walk into a Kirk's Bamboo Bazooka says the high point of my life would be to walk into a place to build karaoke. I could sing Hot Rod Lincoln. I could sing Come Fly With Me. Thank you very much. Fame Name says, Bill, you have a voice for silent films and a face for radio. I got it covered. There was one more that I was really pretty good with. I can sing Shut Down by the Beach Boys. And all the songs that I did sing well were songs that forced me into the lower register. When I try to sing in the upper register in my speaking voice, I crack real easy. But there you go. We're going to have to do. I could sing Sweet Caroline. We're gonna have to do a drunk Stratosphere Lounge. We've never done one before, and I really think that the only way for me to do it would be to. Well, I'd have to stream it, wouldn't I? I'd have to be prepared to delete the copy, but it'd be fun. It'd be fun. So we'll see. All right, is it the last one? Yes. I'm going to try and keep it in this register because it's good for me. And when I did try to warm up my voice, I would go out and I would, like if I was going to do a recording of the Cold War episode or Apollo 13 or something, I'd get in my car and I would sing at the top of my lungs for like 45 minutes, which is not exactly the way to go. When I realized that I had a decent voice was at least a different voice, was after every Gator football game, because when I was at the University of Florida, I never missed a home game, and I watched I watched every one of them when I went back the second time. But when I would go to a game, I would shout so loud and for so long that it would drop my voice by, an octave or two for, 2-3 days. And it's like, yeah, man, I sound like Lou Rawls. Yeah, anyway. That was that. Last one. Braden Higby. I'm going to make a conscious effort to try and keep it down here because this will be a good practice for me to get into if I ever decide to transition into a man. Howdy from Idaho. The 50s and 60s out here saw the high-temperature reactor experiments that replaced the combustion segment of a traditional jet engine with a nuclear reactor, with the ultimate goal of building a nuclear bomber with unlimited loiter time. I remember that project. The experiments were successful, and they built a giant hangar out here to build the eventual plane before the program was canceled by JFK. The only hurdle left in the design was shielding the crew from the reactor, as shielding is too heavy to really work on an airplane. Yeah, works real well on a aircraft carrier or older cruisers or on submarines, but carrying lead is not really great in airplanes. Do you think we might see the return of such ideas now that drone technology is commonplace? A plane that can remain airborne without refueling almost indefinitely seems like a pitch that the Department of War might be open to now. Possibility. One of the things that I thought about along these lines, not specifically an aircraft, but I did have, when I was developing aspects of this science fiction universe that has come together as the colonies, because it's lived in lots of different forms and stuff. I did have a story where a guy had to, they were in orbit and the ship got destroyed, and they had to take escape pods down to a planet and had to try to figure out where they were all going to meet, and then a bunch of these guys had to get there. And one of the things that I thought, I mean, you could build this tomorrow, I would think. Love the idea of jetpacks. I don't like the idea of them failing, but I love jetpacks. And the Jetson mobile is kind of close to that. But what you could build tomorrow, I think, is not a rocket pack. It would be something you would wear, and it would have large fans rather than, drone fans, but two pivotable, large ducted fans. And they would be electric engines, and it would be driven by a what is it called? Thermal RTG, radiothermal generator. Is that it? It's essentially a piece of just a little piece of radioactive material that just heats stuff in a closed loop, and it would just generate electricity. And since the engines are electric, it would have, for all intensive purposes, unlimited range. And I love the idea of this guy, RTG, radiothermal, Atomic Conqueror, the coolest freaking name I have ever seen on the web. Atomic Conqueror should be my name. I love it. It's awesome, man. I can sing the Weatherman, Wellerman. I can sing the Wellerman really well. In fact, when Wellerman came out during COVID, I was singing Wellerman all the time. I love that song. Got that song memorized. Wellerman is a great tune. Unlimited range. It's not a thruster, John. It's a fan. It's an electric fan. So it's an electric motor. It's ducting air. It's not burning rocket fuel. It's just a ducted fan. And the other problem I had, which is I thought much more interesting, was that this one guy had to travel a couple thousand miles or something, and this guy decided, one of these guys who had escape podded down from this ship in orbit, he built a sailplane. Oh, thank you, fame name. That's a high compliment. I appreciate it. He built a sailplane out of parts of flying animals, and he ridge soared. As long as there's air coming, steady flow of wind hitting a mountain range, that air is deflected upward, and you can stay in that rising air faster than the thing is descending. So you're constantly descending through rising air, which means you're up there all day. And this guy ended up building a sailplane out of parts of large birds and things, and he was able to travel, like 1,000 miles. John Person says, so no mass used in the thruster. Like to see that proven. Now there is mass, John. It's the mass is the air. It's not a vacuum. It's designed for use in an atmosphere. So it's essentially a drone, spinning turbine blades that are pushing air down and pushing you up. So there you go. Yeah, I love the Wellerman. Not only do I love the Wellerman, I love the entire Wellerman phenomenon. I love the fact that it was just a guy pounding out a beat, and it just took hold. And then the next thing you know, you're seeing like a couple of guys, like a couple of black guys driving in a car, and one guy's like, "What are you singing?" The other guy's singing it, and then next thing you know, he's completely on board. I loved it. And there was about a year there where sea shanties became really popular, and one of them, I'm going to find the link because I'm going to watch it when we're done. This is where the internet becomes magical. There are times, and you can't predict them, they just happen, where just amazing things happen. By the way, completely off topic, I just opened up the web browser. I was not a religious fan, a completely different topic, of Reno 911, but I don't know if this was a DVD special or something, but there is about a 30-minute segment where they're doing a psychological evaluation of all of the cops on Reno 911, and that was one of the funniest things I have seen in my life. Let me get you that, because I just saw that a couple days ago. Hang on a second. If you like Reno 911, this was great. And the guy who played the psychologist, I think it's Andy something, unbelievable. Oh, one more pop culture thing. I didn't watch The Office. I watched the British Office. I watched all of it, but I didn't watch the U.S. version. But I just did see clips of it, and I'd never seen them before. But it was like a compilation of all of the Creed stuff on The Office. I'd never heard of Creed before. That is brilliant. That character must have been so much fun to write for. Just incredible. All right, so let me find this real quick. Here. If you have any, Andy Daly is a guy. If you have any affiliation or have ever seen Reno 911, even if you haven't, this is just really, 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 really good. Really good. Highly, highly, highly recommended. But that's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is yeah. So there's a sea shanty. It's a slower one. 12 million views. And it's called, the song is called Leave Her Johnny, and it's done by the Longest Johns. And the thing that's beautiful about this is they put it out there, and it was originally sung by these guys in the Longest Johns. There was really one guy just singing it a cappella. And they put out kind of a notice saying anybody who wants to chip in, sing along with our version. And they did, and they ended up getting 500 people. And so this is a version of a sea shanty that's 300 or 400 years old, being sung by 500 modern people from around the world in harmony, and it's one of the most beautiful and transcendental kind of things, just really effervescent thing that you could never in a million years predict. It just came at the right moment. But the song is very sad and beautiful, and this is one of my favorite things on the internet. I just absolutely love this. Did I just blow my conversation? Did I do that? I think I did. Hang on, here it is, YouTube. It's so good. And the name of the ship was the Billy of Tea. The winds blew up her bow, dip down, up, blow, my bully boys blow. Where did I put my, well, that's weird. Oh, come on. Sorry. 1 second, please. Come on, clown. And share. Copy. Here we go. Here you go, Twitch. You'll love it. Okay. I think that is it. Let me see if I missed anything. No, that's it. So anyway, as far as the drone thing goes, oh my God, there's a Wellerman community that looks like, how many? I didn't see this before. How many people are singing on this? That was the thing that made it magical, by the way. He started singing, and then somebody else added harmony, and then somebody else added like a bass line, and then somebody added this, and then a woman came in and added a violin, and it just built and built and built. This version, 6,500 singers, and they've got them all mosaicked. I, for the life of me, do not know how they did that. 6,500 people singing the Wellerman at the same time. I'll just play it for you. Hang on. I'm going to take it in the middle.
Still. The line's
And
not
they've
cut
got 'em
and the whale's not gone. The wellerman makes his regular call to encourage the captain, crew and all. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go.
Interesting connection to this, a good connection to close on, in terms of how this connects to the colonies. This Lisa character, I need to get the space right because she's going to be a really, really important, arguably the most important character, single character, but certainly one of the top 5. And she, when I was trying to figure out who the wife of the pioneers was going to be, I thought, well, maybe she's a scientist. I thought, oh, come on, it's just so done. So I decided to make her something that I thought was essentially useless from a practical point of view. So I made her a music teacher, and that generated so much wonderful stuff. She eventually, in season 2 or 3, becomes voted. In season 2 or 3, she becomes voted the most valuable citizen. And this is something that is just really has, from the beginning of all of these ideas that I've had over the years that coalesced into the colonies, I think probably the single most important thing there. And that is the idea, and it's going to sound very strange, especially for science fiction, but that's why I think this is going to work. I think the single most important thing about this is that these people in the year 2170 or 2270, I haven't decided yet, probably 2270, these people are going to spend time singing together. This is such an essential part of the entire philosophy of the colonies, which is that we've lost our human connection, that devices separate us. Somebody was commenting on it, I don't know, it might have been Sargon, but somebody was commenting on this and said that the reason people don't sing anymore is because of the abundance of entertainment that we have. There are so many excellent singers that nobody wants to sing badly. But the entire point of community singing is it doesn't matter whether you sing badly or not. It's not about you're not trying to make a record that you're going to put on the Voyager and send out, on the Voyager probe and send out as a representation of human talent. It's a social activity, and community singing has been such an enormous part of human evolution, and we've completely abandoned it. That's why karaoke is as popular as it is. And even that's not really community singing, it's kind of individual sequentially singing. But Wellerman took off because of community singing. But when people get together and sing, some strange things happen. Morale goes way up. Guys singing in using songs in terms of war is very, very old. My friend Fritz, who I mentioned, does historical reenactments, told me that the Scottish bagpipes were considered weapons, that they were almost like terrorist weapons because they had the ability to have such an effect on morale. Art Techie puts it very nicely, says singing activates the collective soul. If you ever want to see a really, really absolutely top-rate movie, number one, really just an excellent movie. But the best example of singing is in, I want to say it's a 1964 movie called Zulu. It's Michael Caine's first movie. And it was a remarkable movie for a number of reasons. First of all, it's a historical recount of the Battle of Rorke's Drift, which is right up there with Taffy 3 in terms of overwhelming odds. And one of the things that made Zulu such a remarkable movie is that it was the first movie that I am aware of that treated the Africans as people and really treated them as people instead of ooga booga, guys with spears. Showed the respect that the British had for them. They talked about how these Zulu, I want to say Impi, maybe is the name for an army, could run full run for 12 hours, just a full run, and then go right into battle. They were in that kind of physical shape. But the Zulus were singing all the time. They were singing marching songs. They were singing while they were preparing for battle. They would sing when they go into the charge. And at the very climax of the movie, with this last attack, you have something like 150 British soldiers against 7,000 or 8,000 Zulus, and at the end of it, when they're almost out of ammunition and the Zulus are mounting their final charge, and it looks like this is the one where they're all going to be slaughtered and speared to death, and this wave of Zulu warriors come out. They've fought them off several times already, but they're charging, and before they charge, they're doing this pre-battle song, and the guy who plays Chard, who is a Royal Engineer, was awarded the Victoria Cross. So was Bromhead. More Victoria Crosses were awarded at Rorke's Drift than any other conflict in the history of the British Empire. I think they awarded 12 of them. That's a lot of Medal of Honors to give out for one action. But anyway, just before the Zulus attack, Chard, the British commander, goes up to one of these sergeants or something, who's a Welshman, and he says, "What do you think of their singing?" And the Zulus are singing this very low, way oh, this real low tonal thing. And the Welshman says, "Well, they've got a very good bass section, but they're missing a little on the high end." So as the Zulu charge, and you see these British guys are they're just about ready to crap their pants because this is really, really bad. He gets the British guys to sing "Men of Harlech," which is a Welsh fighting song about standing up, And when you really have to watch this movie. In fact, you don't have to watch the movie. I'll get you the scene. You got these Zulus charging, they're singing their song, low notes, and then you've got these line of British soldiers, just a handful of them, behind these mealie bags that they're used for a defensive wall, and they're singing "Men of Harlech," and these two things are coming together, and the two musical themes are like clashing, and it's one of my favorite moments in the history of cinema. It's right up there with the helicopter attack sequence in Apocalypse Now, and the docking sequence in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and just drop sequence in Aliens. Just one of my favorite pieces ever. Hang on a second. Yeah, here it is. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to play it for you, and I'll also include the link. In fact, I'll turn the camera around. We'll all watch it together. That's what we'll do. That'll be fun. Ready? All right, here we go. Give me a second. Close enough. All right, here we go. Ready? How do I do this so I can hear it? I need to mute my microphone. Hang on. All right, here we go. No, that won't work either. I just got to turn down the volume, so I'll listen to it on my headphones. Hang on. sorry. I got to figure this out. It took me a second. I got to do it this way. I know what I got to do.
You think the Welsh can't do better than that, Owen?
Well, they've got a very good bass section, mind. But no top tenors, that's for sure.
Stop your dreaming. Can't you see their spear points gleaming? See their warrior pennons streaming to this battlefield.
Sing!
Men of Alex, stand ye steady.
Come on, sing!
Sing! Ever said ye, oh, the man of playing man. Present!
Let's go ahead. Sergeant.
We should do this more often. I'll tell you the first thing I noticed about that. First thing I noticed about that was that movie, what you just saw, gave the Zulu Warriors almost 3 minutes to sing. 2.5 to 3 minutes of singing. There's not a film today that could ever dedicate that much film time, screen time, to that. And that's why movies today suck. They spent so much time on those Zulu Warriors letting them sing, and what's happening is, did YouTube blow us down? Yeah. We got shut down for copyright violations. Oh well, that's why we. I hope I don't get a copyright strike for that because I already got one. That would be bad. Anyway, for those of you still on Twitch, let me give these guys. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to probably have to, I don't know, maybe I have to pull that down. I don't know. We'll see. In any event, there's hardly a film that would, I cannot imagine giving you that much time. But what it really did was it just built the suspense, you know, because that sound that the Zulus were making was just otherworldly, eerie, otherworldly. I don't know what to say other than that. It's just excellent filmmaking. And by the time they're at the walls, the whole British defense was a case of them constantly contracting their defensive perimeter. And I'm back. Is that right? Yeah, how about that? So the British are constantly pulling back their defensive perimeter, and when they're doing that volley fire, it actually sounds it sounds like a battleship. It sounds like battleship volleys, just wave after wave, just sheets of lead going out there. By the way, those rifles are Martini Henrys. Their rounds are about that long, and the bullet is, I don't know what the caliber is, but it's huge, and and these guys were, they couldn't move their arms for, like weeks after that. The kick on that Martini Henry, huge bullet, huge, and a big charge behind it, and single cartridge reload, no magazine, but at least they were breech loaders, so they didn't have to, because they've been slaughtered if they hadn't been breech loaders. But that movie is just so remarkable, and the balance, the way they would cut the music. You'd see the Zulus charging, and actually my favorite part of this, I'm so glad I remember this, and then we're going home. So when I went back to Gainesville for the second trip, when I was there for, went back the second time in 93 or 94, and I did a sketch comedy down there called Grazing, and I had a great group of writers. There were about 8 of us, and writers and performers, and everybody brought their ideas, and I was the head writer and director. And I pitched a show called a sketch called the Death Brigade, and I lifted scenes right out of that movie, right from the scene you saw, and I got a British red coat and a pith helmet, and I got an actor, and the idea was that there was a brigade of deaf soldiers at this battle at Rorke's Drift, and he's out there with his diary, and he starts, "My dearest Emily," and he starts talking about the cool breeze over the savannas, and he's just writing. He's just looking down and writing. He's just walking across the scene, and we chroma keyed it, and in the background the entire Zulu charge is happening, and all these guys are firing their rifles, and all of this blood and all of this smoke and everything, and he's just talking about I do believe I saw a red-throated tit, and at that moment when they're coming over the walls and just blast, and he's sitting there and he says, "Boredom is our greatest enemy." I just loved that sketch. I loved it, and then he looks around, of course, and then he's completely mortified. But boredom is our greatest enemy. That'd be great. Yeah, the cabbage crates be coming back over the briny any minute now. I'm sorry, I don't speak. I don't speak RAF lingo. Anyway, yeah, boredom is our worst enemy. All stuff going on. We did a lot of fun stuff back in the day with that. All right, I think it's time for us to go home. And you probably know by now the show's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who keep everything floating and a rocking and a reeling here, and so we're very grateful for them as well. Let's see. I have another MRI scheduled on 17th. Follow-up from the one I did 6 months ago. Just trying to keep an eye on things. So we'll see you on Thursday the 18th for sure for Stratosphere Lounge, and then Monday the 22nd for sure. Christmas is 2 weeks from today. No, sorry, 2 weeks from. I'll get it eventually. Christmas is 1 week from Thursday, so we will definitely see you guys then. RAF banter, yes, I'm banter. That was the word I was looking for. Until then, again, thanks very much for the members for making all this possible, and to all of you great folks for being here. What do I want to do here? I don't want to do that. So, thanks for joining us, and we will see you in a couple of days for your very own Stratosphere Lounge. Hooray.